you look at the totality of strength sports and strength training, and you look at the totality of hypertrophy, even though we're both trying to get physical adaptations from moving weight, it's strange that we take for granted that, well, of course strength training would be phasing.
The biggest lesson I learned from my last competition is that adaptability is everything. Things will go wrong, but how you respond is what makes the difference.
Lately, I've been kind of moving into this idea of like, lifting is probably best when the art form element of it is emphasized.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest again is Alexander Bromley. He was on episode 180. So if you want to know the origin stories and our first conversation, go back, check that out. We're going to kind of just jump forward and move into some fun topics that we have here. Alexander is sport and fitness education content creator, author, creator of Basecamp AI, 2 decades training and coaching, and an active strongman since 2006. Did I miss anything there?
Base strength AI. I was associated with Boost Camp for a while, so those kind of get melded. But no, that's it. Yeah, I've lifted things for a long time. Now I make videos about lifting.
Yes. So where I want to jump off is you just competed. So I like to go through now and find people's quotes and use that as a jumping off place, right?
Okay.
So the biggest lesson I learned from my last competition is that adaptability is everything. Things will go wrong, but how you respond is what makes the difference. So using that as a jump off point, first off, why did you decide to compete again? Because there's been a lapse there.
Sure.
So what was the motivation for it? And then going through, what were some of these? I'm reading this, and all I'm seeing is there's a lot of challenges that popped up. You know, there's a lot of auto regulation and things you had to regulate around there.
Sure.
Different phase of your life as well from when you were competing before. You know, you have a child now, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, he's 9 months now. Yeah, it's our first.
So married with a child, creating content, all these other things compared to 10 years ago, straight up meathead. Yes, there's some differences there.
Completely, yeah. And I mean, if you take anything from lifting, and people like to romanticize lifting as something that can add so much to your life, and it can, as long as you're kind of oriented there and you're trying to look at those lessons and find connections, because it's all problem solving on problem solving on problem solving. And that's, what am I doing with my program, why I'm stuck, and why I'm mad and pissed off and burnt out and disillusioned. And also, how do I organize my life? Because the trajectory is something they don't talk about a lot. People start out just hoping that they can grow a muscle, and they're not concerned with like, what's it going to be like in 10, 20 years? You don't know that until you get there. So your goals change, life shit pops up, your whole organizational structure sometimes has to take a back seat, and you have to be adaptable, but you also have to be able to like find that motivation that keeps you going. So me specifically, me and my wife were in lovely California for years. That's where we were both born, and that's where our families are. And during the shutdowns, we were sitting on our balcony getting text messages from friends. We had several who had moved to Texas. So my wife's not going into the office. I'm working from home. I'm trying to level up the YouTube stuff. And we're getting like Redfin listings sent to us from our friends because the houses are like twice the size and half the price. We're like, you gotta be kidding me. We both work. We're stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment in Redlands. And it's like, what's our future gonna be like? And my wife is, she's a couple years older than me. She looks 19, but she's a couple years older than me. And we were worried about our fertility window. We knew we wanted kids. And that's something we had to chase proactively. And that's what took us to Texas. So it was a hard thing we had to do. Her mom was fighting cancer at the time. But it's like, look, we can't afford to do anything here. We're probably going to have to go through IVF. Let's make it happen. So we found our goal. We committed to it. We made a big leap. And I mean, it worked out. Fast forward a year and a half, we have our son. But yeah, trying to adjust in another state, while I'm trying to move towards this becoming my full-time income, that was fucking terrifying. My wife has been the responsible one since I've known her. I met her. She had a master's degree. She's a supervisor of social work for Riverside County. She was like a mover and a shaker. And I have this like dinky gym, and I'm like, I'm making these cute YouTube videos, you know, it's like, take me seriously. But we got to the point where I was able to flesh that out and actually do something with it, which was, I'm so grateful for it. But that brought us to having our kid. But yeah, now we're in Texas. I'm like, okay, what's training going to be like? I got to film, you know, so many hours a day. And I'm already a nut job when it comes to creative stuff. And, you know, there's a baby screaming, and we're trying to coordinate schedules. And I'm sitting in front of the screen, just eyes glazed over, like, what can I say that I haven't said already? And it was a really vital growing experience. And I'm happy I sought it out, because that was the next obvious chapter in our life. And we're both thrilled. It's something I wouldn't change for the world, but I think it was always in the back of my head I was going to compete. Like I've always started and stopped. It's kind of this binge purge cycle of training. I like hitting it hard for quick preps, often overreaching to my own detriment. And I like taking long periods of time off to enjoy my life. And that's reflected in my physique. People that have followed me for the last 6-7 years have seen the ebbs and flows of my different packages that range from like something looking like a competitive athlete to like, why the fuck are we listening to this guy? And that's always how I've approached it. I always knew that I was going to continue on. And as soon as I got that bit of stability in our life, which it took a little while. I want to say Theo was about 4 or 5 months, and we were kind of steady. And it's like, okay, regionals is coming up in Texas, a lot of good contests in Texas. So let's jump into that and see if I can get a bid for the Arnold. And thankfully for me, I had more experience than strength at this point, but it paid off. So I got an invite to the Arnold for next year without having to go dick around with 300 other people at nationals, which was kind of nice. That's what I'm focused on right now.
So if we consider, I'm just going to throw it out there just for the listeners to have an example, that you need 4 months to be able to prepare for a show. And that 4 months would be that starting line, right? You have to be in a certain condition to be able to be at the starting line. If it's 4 months, whatever that time period is, powerlifters maybe 12 weeks or something like that. But that assumes you're at, say, 80% of where you need to be for that to start. Where were you when you made this decision? How far away were you from that, what you would consider that starting point? The general question would be, how deconditioned did you let yourself? But that doesn't have an anchor, right? Where if we have that anchor, which is going to be a higher anchor than what probably most people are going to have in general.
So if I'm giving objective numbers, because I'm in the middleweight class 105s, that means that I ride around at 250, sometimes 260 like I am right now. And my numbers are obviously a little higher when I'm heavy, when I'm eating Pop-Tarts after every workout and not giving a shit. When I was at my most competitive, I would say right before we made the move and started focusing on having a kid, I was chasing the other static monsters that have arisen in the middleweight strongman recently. I mean, there's too many 800-pound deadlifters now that are also, you know, throwing 400 pounds over their head and are also athletic and also were like D1 football player, like caliber athletes. So I have enough experience with the events because that's where people fall when they're strong. It's like they can move anything and they're fast. They got the raw talent, but to be able to apply that to the dozens of different events you're eventually going to see takes time. That's the one edge I have on people because I've been doing this for like, you know, 20-ish years. Yeah, way too long. This is usually when people are phasing out. I'm like 37 right now. So America's Strongest Man 2021 was probably my best competitive package as far as strength and general ability. Going to qualify for that, I did a 725 deadlift for 5. Strapped in, bounce a piss out of it. But, you know, that was the peak of my deadlift ability. Might have been good for something mid-high 7s at that point. And that still doesn't win a show at the high level stuff. So in my mind, I'm like, I still got places to go. And that's where my overhead was like comfortably over 400 if I'm doing like a push press on a barbell or something. And then stone loading bag carries were good. I mean, working with 1,000-ish pound yokes and 350 per hand farmers and 350 sandbags and so on. So that's kind of the peak. That's me like for the 3 weeks where I'm recovered and I'm ready to go. Going into this long period where it's like, I'm not going to be on gear. I'm probably not going to be training as much. Also, and it all compounds. Like, oh, I don't have a competition coming up anytime soon. And our life is all like in turmoil. So, and that takes away from the training that you do because now you're not beholden to a program. So now it's like, well, let's wing it. And I haven't winged it since I was 17. And when I was 17, I liked to be in the gym a lot more than I do now. so all of that compound. So the short answer to that long rant is pretty effing deconditioned. I would say that I probably got to a point where like a 600 deadlift wasn't doable on any given day. I probably got to a point where a 315 push press wasn't doable on any given day, and that's atrophy, and that's hey, for 6 months I'm waking up multiple times in the middle of the night. I'm worried about staying home with my wife and kid, getting our life centered. But again, the benefit of the time spent is I've done so many damn comebacks that also is an edge I feel like I have, is that I know when things hit the floor where people have meltdowns because the strength they work so hard for is gone, I'm like, it's like four or 5 weeks to get back into something that looks like shape, maybe a couple weeks after that to peak up close to something competitive. And I've done that too many times to count.
All right, so what is that? Because we'll call that a preparatory block.
Yeah.
Right. So what did that look like when you're at your worst condition? It's not really worse condition, it's still better condition than most people, but it falls off pretty hard.
Yeah.
Like when you're in, let's put it this way, when you're in pretty decent gen pop shape, that would be a good way to put it. So what does that preparation block or two look like?
So for me, and this is going to change for everybody because, and this is one of the things I struggled with when I was doing online coaching for a bit and working with people in person. I know what I like to do and why I like to do it. And it's because I've experienced those things that work for me, and I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. And that's a complex thing to have intuition over with strongman, which is so stupidly varied. I know that certain events come back super quick. Stones are like riding a bike. I cannot stone load for 2 years. If my upper body is reasonably strong, my hips are strong, I'm going to stone load just fine. Something like a yoke, if I go 2 weeks without loading a yoke, it feels like 1,000,000 pounds, doesn't matter, whatever it is. So I always start off focusing on static strength because I have experience and I'm peaked out pretty good at just about every event. There's a few events I'm not good at objectively in any field. I have a couple holes, but I'm pretty well-rounded. So static strength is a thing when I'm good, I need to be chasing, and that's a thing that's going to get me back into competitive shape quicker, because if I get my static strength back up, then I'll be able to pick up and run and lift anything in any event just by virtue of the experience. So focusing on that, it's the main lifts I like, the ones that have been my bread and butter, the ones I probably got most of my development off of. So squats and deads, obviously. There's a couple of accessories that I like. And then really push pressing. I mean, I rarely deviate from push pressing. You know, a lot of guys will strict press, or a lot of guys will do high incline, you know, bench presses or something, but I'm push pressing as a main lift. So if I do a simple, like a novice level linear progression, it works astoundingly well for me. I mean, literally I can come back and it's like, whatever I can do, I'm gonna find a comfortable 10, and I'm not even gonna have an ego about what it is. And I go in and I hit that 10 and it kind of sucks and I'm a little sore and my ego's hurt because the weight, but it's like, no, that's what I'm doing. That's the baseline. And then every time I come in, it's just increase where I can. And I know my cap. I do not like to go ham in the gym. I'm not like one more rep pussy. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, the point is to improve, but also where it makes sense. And I also focus on other things besides just effort and weight, like adapting to the same weight for more sets, or increasing frequency, or finding kind of in between exercises that give stimulus and also do other things but are easy to recover from. So that's really what I focus on. It's starting kind of with the minimum, very light, usually rep based, and then just adding weight where I can. And as I get more conditioned, I can add exercises. That's the other thing I like to do with volume, is I don't like to start with a shit ton of volume. That doesn't make any sense. I like to get my basic faculties up to snuff, and then by the time you're stronger and conditioned, you get so much more out of the volume. And it's like this anyway. So that's something I do a lot.
All right, so you're taking your key indicators that you know bring you strong. You put those in first, and that's probably a big change, because if all you're doing before that is I'm going to go in the gym and do something, you know, that something sometimes might not be a whole lot. You know, it's just enough to kind of get by because you want to have work done or get all these other things done. Yeah. So those junk movements, for lack of a better word, get replaced with movements that actually do drive where you want to go. So you start with those, you slowly build those up to build the strength to be able to add in the accessories, which will cover the hypertrophy. Yeah. Where I'm going with this is a lot of times we'll see the opposite. Like, I'm going to start with this hypertrophy phase, which will look like a bodybuilding phase, and they won't put in those main things until after they've put this muscle mass back on. Then they put those main things back in, and it's actually too late, because they don't have enough time to refine those.
Completely.
So as you're increasing the volume of the main things, at what point will you break it off to start putting in the accessories?
So I wish I could say that I have this system. This is what I always do. I have like general trends, and that's really just because of the chaos of what the competitive season looks like. I've had years where I've done 8 contests. I've had years where I've done none. This year, I will have done 1 in the middle of the year. So usually when I'm back ramping up, it's because I have a contest, because that's the only thing that makes me disciplined enough to diet down.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that makes me do cardio and stick to these programs. When I don't have that, even if I'm still driven and motivated, it's a lot more instinctive, and I'll experiment a bit more. So if I'm ramping up, adding weight, after so many weeks, it's like, I feel my strength coming back. And I have just a bunch of points of reference, and I recommend everybody else do the same. Like, have a list of reps and know what weight at each rep count approximates to your strength levels. It doesn't have to be precise, but it's something to shoot for. It's so useful to be able to know, what a certain triple means, a certain 10 rep, 15 rep maxes I'll keep track of, so I can kind of intuit where I'm at, and that gives me a lot of information. So usually the comebacks come really quick, back to eating, back to training, and I feel like it's the movements that developed you initially. You're probably going to get more out of when you come back to them, even if it's a similar movement. But if it's that's how I feel. But that's why I always go back to the same movements I did when I was like 16, which are these basics. And then increase happens quick. Eventually numbers start looking where I'm feeling okay about them. And then usually adding sets is where I go. Then it's usually like, okay, I got to start wedging in event work. So that comes in really quick. For me, when I'm on my high accessory type workouts, because I love volume. I love doing everything under the sun. Like, let me hit out my basic barbell, a couple of mechanically similar movements, and then let me spend an hour and a half just doing shit I pulled out of Flex magazine like 20 years ago. And my biggest upswing, actually going into America's Strongest Man, that's what I was doing. Me and Laura had the gym. She'd meet me after work, 3 hours in the gym. I'm a big believer that if you want to push it, it's going to be more, not less. The margins of growth per unit in there are not going to be the same, but that's not what you care about. You care about the absolute number at the end. So I'm only doing the accessories really when I know I got a long track of no competition ahead of me, or if I'm starting out in shape and I do have 6 or 8 weeks to dedicate that before I'm in that like 6-week run, 8-week run where I'm just doing events up to that peak. So but it is very much kind of that middle range, because I don't do that if I'm starting from scratch. And I think it's stupid if you're a brand new lifter, unless you're like really manic about lifting. I encourage people to go out and go crazy. But when you're starting out, when you're brand new, or if you're coming just super deconditioned, little baby steps is all it takes to ramp you back up. But yeah, once you have a little bit of conditioning, I think that's really where it makes sense.
So after this time off and you start coming back, did you find a lot of the accumulated damage, injuries, and stuff that you were dealing with, that time off was beneficial?
Completely. Now, for a couple reasons, and this is, God, I could go on a rant about the whole discussion around injury or like load management or whatever. And it hits me specifically because I did have so many issues that I've had for so long. But the worst was I had 2 sprained patellas that I did on a push press that got wonky like 8 years ago. And that lasted for 5 or 6 years. Anytime I'd step up on a curb, climb stairs, whatever, when I'd squat, I'd just have to lather them in Tiger Balm and a ton of ibuprofen, which I don't like to do. Hips, I had horrible IT band pain. I've had probably a dozen really bad low back injuries that put me out for at least a month before I could kind of start loading again and enjoying my quality of life. So all of that racks up. My shoulders, like torn labrums, torn rotator cuffs, on and on. So the time off, it was like the inflammation just eventually went away. And that's not to say that, hey, if you're hurting, just stop doing it. I think that's the worst thing you can do. But when you're on the other end of that spectrum, when you're the guy that's always pushing through the pain, it's like, okay, first off, you have to just stop making shit worse.
Yeah.
Because if you're continuously pushing, even if you're getting stronger, you might not be having that get better. But if you can pull back and actually let your body catch up and let shit normalize, you might find that inflammation kind of dissipates. I don't think we have a crystal ball with that, but for me, I had enough years clocked where I'm like, well, this isn't working, so let's try this. And then, yeah, and just in taking the time off, my hips got better, my knees got better. Now, the other important component too is gear use contributes. Yeah. And I found out the hard way that my crippling hip pain, I mean, it was bad for years. It was not a byproduct of the millimeters of hip shift. I mean, I was going through everything. Like, why do my hips hurt? Like, I got to do more mobility work. I got to get steeper squat shoes. I got to, like, just on and on. Special exercise. I got to foam roll. Oh, I got to not foam roll. I got to ART. I was about to go get acupuncture. I was desperate. Mm-hmm. And I found out it was the type of compounds I was using just inflamed the fuck out of me. And I'd been steadily rotating them in, especially up until contest prep for so long. And once I was off gear for about 2 years. And oh my God, it was so nice just to, it's like, okay, things are regressing. It's like you see you're coming back down to baseline, especially I'm not training, but it was just such a breath of fresh air and my body really felt the difference. So now I know it's like, oh, the filthy, quick and dirty shit that everybody loves because it comes in pill form and you get strong as fuck in like 7 days. Yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore because my joints feel like shit. I'm riddled with inflammation. I feel lethargic. I get back pumps. I break. It's like the worst list of sides. And that was one of them that just plagued me forever.
Have you found with the training now that the frequency of how hard and heavy you can go has to be longer, or there has to be more days in between the heavier frequency of the frequency of the heavier days?
Yes. So that's something I'm still playing around with and experimenting. And there's so many confounding variables there because it's like, is it a genetic predisposition? Is it how good you are? If you're a fast or a slow gainer, whatever that means. How does the gear influence it? Maybe all those things are in your favor, but maybe your joints just can't tolerate it. That gives you anyway. So I do generally find that as time goes on, if I'm doing heavy shit, which historically hasn't been a staple, but I'm trying to make it more, I'm trying to do more consistent work that way, then yeah, I'm better off going 9 days as opposed to 7, let alone 2. But I really do believe frequency is like one of the things, again, if you're pushing to be the champion, if you're part of the Bulgarian team or you're the guy that was born in a brick shack, like Naim Salamaduglu, your way out is to kill yourself and do everything you can to survive so you come out the other end. And I think frequency, provided you don't fall apart, is part of that equation. So I've been experimenting a lot more with rotations within the week so I could pull off deadlifting 2 or 3 times a week, which I've never done before. And I've actually been surprised with how the recovery difference is so dramatic because I've always been like, oh, this exercise works. Let me just do that over and over and over. And I feel like that has a much more faster, more aggressive cap. Overuse issues probably are going to come in sooner.
When you say it's 3 times a week, what does the loading look like? So what does this wave look like?
Yeah, so because this is still kind of experimental for me, I know how other people have done it. I could talk about the different systems that kind of use it, what it looks like for them. For me, I'm experimenting right now because so much of my time is spent. Like some of the first advice I got from some of the big pullers in strongman was, I'm like, oh, you guys must just deadlift all the time. They're like, we deadlift twice a month. It's especially with strongman, you're doing so many things that hit the posterior chain. But there's also, it's like a camp, an ideological camp. There's also, and again, also there's people that maybe their genetics don't really allow that. Maybe it's psychological. Who the hell knows? Nick Camby, competed with him a lot. And I think he was on here at one point. Fantastic athlete. Cool dude. I like talking to Nick, but he's super talented. But for the longest time, he was amazing at everything except deadlifting. And then all of a sudden he shows up, now he's got an 800-pound deadlift, and that was like at the peak before he moved up to the heavyweights. And now he was unbeatable there. And I was talking to him like, dude, what'd you do? And he's like, I started deadlifting twice a week. Now he's rotated. You do like trap bar deads to allow recovery because you're more upright. Your leverages are a little bit better. So pulling from these people, I find that there doesn't seem to be a thread. Like I've known people that will go hard as hell on both days. I've known people that, one's just a recovery day, it's just to get touches. I know people that'll follow really elaborate undulating schemes. as of right now, especially because it's so unpredictable how I'm going to feel on it every given day, it would be like that for any lift, but for fucking deadlifts, it's like I have no idea how strong I'm going to wake up feeling good. I'm going to be whistling, coming out the door, kicking my heels together. I'm going to pull a PR today. Everything's just going right. And you get there, the bar starts moving like shit. Somebody's distracting you in the back. Yeah, like you don't know.
Yeah.
And where I've been hungover, like vomiting that morning when I was like 22, and my friends dragged me to the gym, and I ended up hitting an all-time PR that just flew. And it's like your body lies to you a lot, and it's hard to anticipate that. So I'm trying to auto-regulate a lot more. I have a couple of different things I think of as being stimulating, which is like different than if you're doing a really comprehensive periodization thing, because it's not about what the workout does. It's about how it fits into kind of everything, like the music as a whole. Whereas like bodybuilding is more like, well, what are we doing today? I want to stimulate growth today. That's all I'm worried about. So I'm trying to think about, okay, what's generally stimulating for growth? And I have different protocols, whether I'm doing 3s or 10s, or whether I'm blending them, or whether it's density based, whatever. I have a handful that I like. And it's just, okay, what's my tolerance today? What do I think feels good? Especially after my first exercise, I have no idea what's going to feel okay for my second or third. And then as I warm up, I get an idea of what that's going to look like. So right now I'm trying to do kind of a DUP thing, but really off the cuff. Like I don't know until I've got, 50% on the bar, and then it kind of starts to make sense.
Well, if we're looking at DUP, which is basically auto regulation, so if there's guardrails, like you shouldn't exceed this top end, and here's the bottom, like you shouldn't reduce under this low end, right? Then you have all this room to kind of work within. So the first question would be, how do you define the auto regulation? Because to me, that's the key for any lifter that wants to succeed long-term to figure out. And the second would be, how do you determine or help others to determine what those guardrails are at the top and the bottom? And to elaborate a little bit more for those that are listening, at the top would be those days you feel really, really good. And it's like, well, fuck it, I can take another one. But you probably don't want to do that because it's so far ahead of where you are in your cycle that it could compromise the recovery of the next training session. So there's a top end, and people will fuck up. Feels really good, This is probably why most of us are fucked up, by the way. Then on the bottom end, if you do have to reduce and cut down, very rarely are you just going to be like walking in, it feels kind of like shit, I'm leaving the gym and not doing anything. So there's...
And I'm curious, and not to derail this, but like your experience and all the people you've talked to, and this question I'm sure comes up a lot. I mean, have you found anything that looks like kind of a complete, comprehensive answer to that question?
No. I just know it's important to know the answer.
It's conceptually very important, right? But the idea of especially the way we like to package information, I think it's always been like this, but social media, internet's made it a billion times worse. We like to have little single sentence heuristics for shit that's insanely complex, where the answer is probably different for every individual, and probably different for those individuals over their training lifetime. There's just dimensions of complexity. It's extremely important, and that's what I try to intuit about myself. That's what drives me absolutely crazy when I am trying to coach other people, especially remotely, because I stay up thinking about that, even though I have no amount of data in any universe that would give me any insight into that question.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard.
It's very hard because on the lower end, it could be, how many times you're going to take the bar before you start putting plates on it, because you're inherently making that decision, like, oh, the bar feels like shit. I need to do it again. Or you put one plate on and it may say, do for 1 set of 5, and it feels like shit. And if you put 2 1/4 on, it's going to feel even more like shit. So I'm just going to do the bar again. All these micro decisions are like really low level. Then on the higher level are the ones to where things are feeling good or they're on plan. You kind of know where you are. And sometimes you can be going through these blocks and be in this phase to where, I am way ahead of where I should be. I need to start pulling some shit back, right? Which, that comes later, but pull it back, because if I keep going in this direction, even if you just run the numbers logically, like if I keep growing in this direction, then I'm going to be lifting 200 pounds more than I ever have before. And that's not going to happen. But some people are going to be like, oh my God, but they don't see, they keep pushing, they're going to hit that brick wall, and now they can't even deload out of it. They're basically fucked, and they're just going to go in more beat up. And that's the complexity that plays into all that. Is I think for a lot of people, they're already kind of micro making the decisions, because on every set that you do, you're making a decision of when that set's really going to end. Right? So let's say you want 2 reps in reserve and it's 8 to 12 is the range, but it's going really well. So now it's going to be, you got to decide through that set, is this going to be 14 or am I just going to go to slower tempo to get it to fail where I kind of want to fail? And there's so, you get what I'm saying? There's so many variables, but I think the biggest ones are realizing what impact the training session you're having on a given day is, how it's going to impact the next training session in the microcycle. That is important. You know, so if Tuesday is just cardio bullshit, but Monday's heavy, you know, is Monday going to benefit or take away from Wednesday? Because if it starts taking away from Wednesday too much, because it's always going to systemically take away some, now you got a problem. You got to go back and see, you know, what happened there. And sometimes the answer to that, as you know, it isn't the training. It's the stress, it's the rest, it's the recovery, it's the nutrition, it's all the other things that kind of played into that. So you're doing it almost on a subconscious level, because there's also the game of when the stuff gets heavy, you start asking yourself, oh, fuck, you know, is this just a shit day, or do I just suck today and I got to find a way to not suck and then push through to make sure you just don't suck? Because you've been doing it for decades. There's a lot of times that you're going to walk in there, you don't even want to be there. You know, you just have to check boxes. But once you get started, then it ends up being a good day, but you're already kind of starting at a deficit, because you go in with this high volume plan, you do some warm up stuff. You're like, you know what, maybe I'm just going to do like some HIIT training on shit, just do 1 set of each thing and get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's funny you said that about being ahead. It reminded me, there was this guy, shout out to Chris Flores. He was a member at our gym years back. He was a powerlifter. And the guy was a maniac. He worked, can't remember if he was a nurse. He had some medical field job, but he would just burn it coming off no sleep and just grind. The guy did not have an off switch. You know, it was kind of cool to watch. But he got very strong, very fast. And I remember talking to him one day, and he's telling me about his program, because he got a powerlifting program from, I forget who, but he's working through the numbers, and he's like telling me, he's like, oh yeah, you know, I got this meet coming up on this. He's like, I'm already like, you know, 2 weeks ahead of the program. And I didn't understand. I'm like, you're 2 weeks ahead of the program. I'm like, this isn't like doing your homework where you can do it all the night before, or you can do it all the first week and be done with no, the date matters. You know what I mean? Like, and you realize it doesn't occur to other people it gives you insight as to the dots that aren't connected for a lot of people with what purpose things serve and how things fit together. And the fact of like recovery matters, and depending on what you do on each day, things have to change in proximity or magnitude. And trying to get to the bottom of, okay, like, let's bring this down to earth, see if we can give some concrete examples. If you're in a specific workout, you feel like dog shit, and you have this question, okay, I can go left and I can just suck it up, buttercup. I'm going to let it fly today no matter what. Or I can go right and I'm going to be real conservative. I'm just going to hit my benchmarks, live to fight another day. We always think that there's like going to be one easy kind of point of reference that we can give to other people for that we can sum it up easily. If you're in the throes of an injury, you're going to be going around telling people like, you got to be careful. You can't do that last one, leave a couple in the tank. I've been like that, you know, where that's the thing in my head. I just, oh my God, I got my 9th back injury. It's like, you know, maybe deadlifts aren't really good for people. Maybe they shouldn't be doing it. And you get in your feels. Where on the other hand, if I'm burning and I've really discovered a new ability to grind that I didn't have before, it's going to be like, oh, you know, people aren't working hard enough. They got to go in, they got to try. And they're both important. It's like how you pair it together is difficult. But I said I was going to bring this back down to earth. As a concrete example, you want to look exactly at what the spirit of the program is. And this is why I think one of the most important things that somebody can do, if they're going to be the type of lifter that follows programs, is to figure out a type, a method, a general approach that you like, and master the fuck out of it. That's not going to fit everybody. Some people do like instinctive training, and through effort and experimentation are going to grow. And that psychological aspect can bring a lot to it. But if you know the spirit of the program, then you can make decisions. But I can't tell anybody shit about fuck when it comes to what their decision should be unless I know exactly what they're doing. Are you relying on skill development through a lot of touches? Is this like the Olympic lifting programs applied to powerlifting, where it's literally just you're training the same way like a shot putter would train? It's all skill. Or are you training like, I don't know, a power builder that it's all hypertrophy work with some heavy lifting thrown in, and we're worried about stimulus and breaking the muscle down, whatever bro speak, like we're just trying to like get a stress in, brother. That will tell you a lot. I write programs like, take a progression I have. Like, I really like the 3x5 plus. It was a take on starting strength, like a 3x5. I got that from Grace Skull LP. Johnny Payne put that out, and he made some modifications. It was really like adding curls and pull-ups, I think, and having you do the last set to failure. Because if you're a novice, why wouldn't you just do a hard set? That's a really good, easy potential stimulus you're getting, and teaching yourself how to grind. It comes at like no cost to you. You're going to grow faster. It's like, and it was great. And I even use that now. It's one of my favorite comeback protocols. If that's what I'm doing, then I know, okay, next week I'm going to be adding weight, or next session, might be in a couple days, I'm going to be adding weight. I might feel like shit, not want to lift, but the weight starts out light enough. I know I can do something, and maybe by that third set, I'll feel good. And that's one of the benefits of something like that. It's like, okay, I get a lot of touches to really prove to myself this is a dog shit day before I'm granted the right to just cut and run and do something else. But that's going to be entirely different than if I'm going into like a really elaborate, like Soviet wavy periodization nonsense, because at that point it doesn't matter. It's like most of the shit's submaximal. It's skill work. Even on a bad day, you can get through most of the work. It's just one of my Discord members referred to a protocol I had. He said it's just being a volume slave, and I'm like, that's kind of what it is. Just go and be a slave to the volume and check the boxes, and you can do that in a program. It sucks mentally, you might not want to. I don't know how on God's green earth, like in the throes of conjugate training, when maximal plus there was always that incentive to know what your last number was and beat it. I don't know how the hell you guys made it through that shit, given those days. It's like you weren't even allowed to have bad days, I would think.
Well, the way we kind of played through that was, if it's max effort lower body on Monday, max effort upper body on Tuesday. So everything was gauged upon recovery, right? Even how much gear I was going to use. So I knew on Monday, being lower body, I should wake up Tuesday and feel like I got hit by a truck. No, not really any muscle soreness, no DOMs or anything like that. Just, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You just feel like you got fucking hit by a truck.
Yes.
That should dissipate about midday, and then maybe some muscle soreness will start, later in that day. But then come Wednesday, there might be a little bit of systemic 5% or whatever systemic fatigue on Wednesday. But if it became more than that, like now when I go to sit on the bench on Wednesday, it's like, oh fuck, I'm still feeling like I got hit by a truck. Then either what happened on Monday was beyond the ability for me to recover, or the drugs need to go up because they're probably fake. So that was kind of how it played into, how it fed into that next one, where with the max effort thing, fortunately, I didn't have to think about how's this going to feed into next Monday's max effort, because the movement's going to change, and it may go from something that's a really high load, 700 pounds, to something that's a very low load, close stance box squat on a 10-inch box, 400 pounds. Right. So the load would kind of take care of that. But I did have to think, how's this going to affect Friday, or how's the dynamic day? How's Friday going to impact Monday? But that didn't matter as much, because to me, Friday's a technical day. Forget the compensatory acceleration, all that. That's reinforcing the technique of the skill that we do.
Sure.
That was the most important. And so if that was going to fuck up Monday, who cares? Because Monday was just max effort. The weight's kind of irrelevant. It was just the ability to strain and to learn how to strain, but as things progressed in further years to where those speed cycles really became strength blocks, and because percentages move up because of bands and the chains and so forth. So I can't really sit here and say this is dynamic work when it's fucking 90%. It's like very fast max effort work. Then Mondays would get dropped out. It would just become accessory type of work, because it's kind of encompassing both. But inherently, just kind of the way it was built taught us all the importance of this recovery thing. And if it got really bad, then you stick in recovery modalities if needed, steam, sauna, whatever the fuck would psychologically, that's where I've come to the conclusion on all this, whatever would psychologically be able to help to get through those final weeks. Now, if this shit's happening 12 weeks, 16 weeks out, there's a problem. You're out of shape.
Yeah.
That's all it is. You're just out of shape. And your work capacity, GPP, whatever it needs to come the fuck up. Like the accessories need to come up. The cardio work, sled dragging, all that has to come up because you just can't fucking recover from simple shit. So that's why it worked for some and didn't work for others, because if you weren't able to cognitively kind of figure out where this needs to be and where you need to be. Like I know at 8 weeks out, this should be around here. At 4 weeks out, this should be around. There's like benchmarks kind of built in, and the max effort exercises would kind of play into that a little bit, which was different for me coming from more block training going into it, because each block had a different benchmark. So it's like 4 weeks, this is an explosive block. So I need to be able to move this at, 0.8 meters per second, or if it was heavy bag pushes or depth jumps or shit like that, there were heights I was kind of going off of. So I know going in, it's not going to be where I want it to be, but here's where it should be at the end of the block. Then I got to hope the skill, the abilities I built in that block, will it transfer through the full next block? So if I was doing a dynamic block, for me, that held long. It held actually 4 to 6 weeks, which that's long from that motor ability. For some people, it's only a couple weeks. That could hold. The max strength is what sucked. Because and for other people, that holds for a long time. For me, it was like I can go through a max strength block, and then 3 weeks later, I fucking suck again, because of that. So it was a big change in perspective, because now you're looking at indicators on a weekly basis, from that recovery standpoint, where the older block type models didn't really matter. It's like, here's the goal at the end of this 4 week, mine were probably 6 weeks, at the end of the 6 week block, here's where it needs to be for me to even move into the next block. Because if it's not there, then a lot of things need to change in that load. A lot of things needed to change in the next block because it didn't accomplish what that was. Hypertrophy was another one. You would go through this I think it was like 2 hypertrophy blocks. And granted, most of it's probably glycogen and water. And so I'm not putting 20 pounds of muscle on. I don't see nobody.
It's
but
all lean bass. Bro.
Yeah, I mean that's the crazy thing with strength athletes. They think going through like a 4 or 6 week hypertrophy block is going to put on tons of muscle, and it's like you realize bodybuilders have 52-week hypertrophy blocks, and they really would love to put on 10 pounds of lean body mass. Yeah. You're going to do this in 4 weeks.
I've seen the people throw up the DEXA scans like, my body fat dropped 5% in the last 28 days. And it's like, no, it didn't. But yeah.
So one of the goals I've had just through the podcast and just content in general over a period of time is, how do we teach people these components to be able to help them to be able to auto-regulate things? Because if it's a client of yours, it's going to be a way better question they're going to ask, for one thing, because your feedback's going to be better.
Yeah.
It's not just this one thing. And then help them realize they kind of already are doing it, but they don't know they're doing it. It could be that one set, like, man, this set feels really good. It's a work set. I need to go harder, but they don't know it. Because when they start connecting those dots, because this shit matters, because as you get older and older and older, these decisions become, even when you're younger, you can get away with fucking anything, right? To a point, you may end up paying for it 20 years later, but you can kind of get away with anything. You get older, you got to be really strategic on knowing what works, what absolutely really doesn't do shit for you. You just like to do it, and how to balance it. So how have you, through all the different training approaches that you've used, because with kanji, you really don't have to lay a whole lot out. It's like, here's the 3 week wave. Everything else is just kind of auto-regulated, and you don't understand the basics behind it. I guess you're fucked, because it's really hard to lay out a program. You've worked on programs that you lay out, but then they're regulated to begin with. So when you're going to lay those things out and you're looking at things like recovery and deload weeks, they got to be programmed in. We're on conjugate, maybe. Yes and no, right? But the reason I say yes and no is because if we have a 3 week squat wave isn't week 1 the deload from week 3 because it went back down? You know, so it's, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's, and then I'll do this where I'll go follow the fractal all the way down, trying to chase this answer. And then there's a moment where I'll stop and pull my head back and consider all the different methods of training that people use, how even people that use the same method don't do the same method for all the reasons you just stated, because they're making different decisions. Who knows if they're making the right decisions? To figure out if you're making the right decision would require a level of investigation we technologically don't have the ability to do. It's all intuition and pattern recognition, as it should be. And lately I've been kind of moving into this idea of like, lifting is probably best when the art form element of it is emphasized. Like, yeah, the concrete objective stuff is important, but knowing the limitations of that is also important. And I desperately want to be able to give people those benchmarks you talked about. And it's after a very long discussion of what's the type of program we're doing, what do we think we know about your tolerances, what do we think we know about your psychology, and so on. And then after so many steps of educated guessing, you come up, okay, I think this is a good program. But if I'm being honest, I have to assume that enough of those answers are going to be wrong. It's like that Squid Game bit where they were jumping on the panes of glass. You know, it's like left to right, one of them's going to break. And the mathematician's doing the odds of the likelihood that one person's going to make it to the end after only, you know, a dozen or so steps. It's like astronomical. And that's what training feels like. So instead of getting disillusioned, I kind of am like, well, I think more things yield a right answer than we like to think about. And that's because we are adaptive creatures. I mean, I remember going over the argument between like classical Western periodization, which is, you know, the volume 10s, 8s, 6s, 5s, 4s, which, as I understand it, was kind of like the kiddie watered down version of what the Soviets actually did, which was very wavy, and you know, you got high and low volume, high and low intensity. They'll get paired together in different ways. So you might, it's like coin flips where you might get heavy days, a few in a row where you're overreached, but it's going to come out of the wash organically. And that's kind of true. It's like you can overreach for a while and your body will hit the brakes until you don't. And that's the delayed reaction you get. And this all is like, I imagine every program you could write has its own sales letter of like what it does and why you should consider it. And it's all because they each address things the other one doesn't, but they'll invariably have holes that the other one fills. And like you talk about conjugate, and I've criticized its popularization among casual, I would say new lifters. If you're training solo in a 24-hour fitness and you've been lifting for 4 weeks and you're really enamored with the old black and white photos of, you know, monsters just getting at it in the gym, moving insane amounts of weight with these really cool inventions and really innovative methods, it's like, that's great, but what are your needs right now, and how likely are you to derail the fuck out of your training by doing something that has too many layers of complexity beyond what you need?
Too many exercises.
Too many exercises. Before, not enough skill acquisition for like the main. Like you don't even know how to really hinge. You don't really know how to squat. And also the fact that it's not really necessary at a certain point, and that maybe really just effort on like any rep range. You know, simplicity. So there's a lot of reasons. But if we're looking at conjugate, like everything you talked about, it's like those are big problems you solve, like massive. The fact that you are rotating exercises, and even if you have the presence of mind to kind of alternate between really high load, optimized, like really advantaged movements versus disadvantaged ones where the load's going to be lower, things like that. There's so many ways that you can kind of feel what you're good for and go for that. And again, get that organic recovery. We keep going back to the psychology. That's a big one. I mean, getting excited about the same lift. I've known people that ran through like a Shiko template and their eyes just glaze over. It's like how many of the same thing. So all these programs solve different things. Is one of the reasons I roll my eyes. The discussion around programming these days tends to very much talk about individual variables. You know, what's the best amount of intensity, or what's the best and it doesn't even, the question doesn't even make sense, because it's like, in the context of what? And unless you're talking about the system it's in, you know, it's like, how long is a piece of string? It doesn't matter. So as far as what people can pull out of this to actually apply to their training, I would say as fast as you can, take whatever system you're on and start personalizing, because I think so many people can grow from cookie cutter templates. I think they're good. They shouldn't be the gold standard. It should be your job to take whatever template you're following and progress it according to the feedback you have on your body. And there is no substitute for time. Anything beyond that is going to be educated guessing.
All right. Well, before they get there, we skipped a couple steps. So you spoke about the spirit of the program. So define what you mean by the spirit of the program.
So the spirit being what levers the author of the program is trying to pull, what he's focused on, and what he doesn't care about at all. Because there's no program that does everything. Yeah. You can't do everything. Well, actually there is. It's called NSUNS, and it's getting hit with a pile of rocks. I got a bunch of shit on Reddit because it's Reddit's favorite program, and I got a bunch of shit because I made a review of it. Anyways, the spirit of a program is going to be an emphasis on skill, or is it an emphasis on volume? Is it an emphasis on effort? How many exercises do you use? How do you order the exercises? What's the frequency of all the exercises you're doing? Are some higher priority? There's an incalculable number of ways you can arrange these, but everybody's writing a program starts with, okay, I want this person to take this lift and I'm going to have them treat it in such a way that I think they're going to get stronger. So let's say what I'm writing for what I've been doing recently, where I'm experimenting with more frequency because I didn't really have a contest coming up. Okay, I want to adapt to more frequency with this movement that's historically given me a shit ton of problems, which is a deadlift. So how am I going to do that? Well, I need to recover. Okay, I can't recover if I'm doing a hard deadlift on Monday and then a hard deadlift on Wednesday and then a hard deadlift on Friday. How do I change that? Well, I got some tools. I can do lighter workouts. Okay, so now it's not a stimulating workout. Grinding on a set of 5 has a different effect on your body than if you go in and you do 3 sets of 5 when it's really like a 15 rep max. Mm-hmm. That's not to say it's useless. It does something else, and you're still racking up something in the way of, I don't know, fatigue, skill acquisition, whatever. There's still a positive result from that, so it's worth doing. Or instead of an easy day, I can change the threshold. Every time you change something, I think there's like a recovery element. Like if you're used to doing 5s, you go and you do a set of 10. It might be harder because you're not used to it, but also easier because it's a different threshold. Change the movement. It's a big one. Why do deadlifts beat the shit out of me? Because I'm built like a dachshund and I have a long torso and short arms. I have to bend way the fuck over and it sucks. And it turns out that if a body part has the ability from a given stress to go this way and adapt to get thicker and stronger, or go this way and fall apart, my lower back tends to fall apart unless I do other shit. Okay, well, how about I make my leverages better? And that's where I'm like looking at how guys that can deadlift all the fucking time, you look at somebody who's built like a Pete Rubish or something where they're really open at the start. I'm like, oh, how do I get in that position? So I'm starting to do block deads. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of in the same position. Wow, I can recover from this. Or I did a froggy stance, like sumo variation recently. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I could just yank the fuck out of this bar and my back's fine. Anyways, you're taking all these things to try to serve this specific end. And the logic just has to build in sequence. So if I'm the newbie, or if I'm the guy who's an intermediate and I want to get a program that's going to take me to my dream numbers, I have to look at what I think the program is trying to get out of me. And that's going to inform my decision making. Percentage-based programs, like the Soviet-derived models, don't give a fuck about stimulating reps. They don't give two shits about what exercise science is saying right now about effort, training to failure, or whatever. And granted, most of these are not hypertrophy-focused programs, but you're still going to get big as shit if it puts 200 pounds on your squat over a period of time. They care about the neurological aspect, about clocking skill work, about touches. Same way a basketball player is going to count how many free throws they do. That's you with your squat. That's you with your deadlift. That opens up other avenues. If you're not blowing your wad on the heaviest block pull or the heaviest box squat that you can do, you can actually do different movements. Shako tweak that he likes to do is you might squat and then deadlift and then go squat again. There's guys that can't wrap their head around squatting and deadlifting in the same workout, let alone going back and forth. But you can do that because the spirit of it's different. It's speed, technique, repetition, 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 repetition. Now, a lot of people, even a lot of powerlifters, probably don't train that way so much.
Summer's here and so is the heat. I've spent most of my life training in unconditioned gyms, and I know most of you that are training in garage gyms, private gyms, black iron gyms, know what I'm talking about when I say the heat sucks. It kills your motivation to go to the gym, it kills your performance, but it doesn't have to if you keep your electrolytes up. That's why today's episode is sponsored by Element. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. This means lots of salt with none of the junk. No sugar, no colors, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. It contains an electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. Element can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms associated with electrolyte deficiency. Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. Get yours at drinkelement.com. This deal is only available through the Table Talk link.
If you had to guess, like, what would you say is probably the most popular general approach amongst like powerlifters today? Do you think you could put your finger on one?
Well, definitely more frequency. Definitely waving the frequency in the microcycle. They're not going heavy all the time.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of say more linear, but not a lot of fives, mostly threes and ones, you know, but starting the cycle with very, very light threes, you know, and then kind of working up through there. So definitely blocked with the threes and the ones for sure. Maybe short blocks of the fives with a higher frequency for sure.
And more, do you think repeating sets in those rep ranges as opposed to hitting like a top set?
For that's a psychological thing, right? Because for some, yes, I would say there's more sets for sure. You know, as they get older and they get stronger, maybe it does drop down to that one heavy work set. But for a lot of people, they just can't stand having to use the same exercise for 3 sets of 3, where they might chip it just to have something more. You know, I fall in that camp where it's like, oh my God, the same weight, like we can't add a fucking 5. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's start 10 pounds light. Let's at least make these 3 different things, you know, because of that. But that's where I would say it falls there. I love this concept of the spirit of the program, because for people who want to geek out and try to figure out how programming works and how to program better, I've always made this suggestion of look at the most popular programs and kind of, you know, is this like linear? Is this block? Is this conjugate? But when you get into the weeds, they're all block. You know, no matter how you look at it.
All roads go to...
They're all linear. I mean, so it gets a little confusing once they grasp that first thing. But if they're looking at that spirit of that program, then it's easier to peel it back, think at a deeper level, because it should be very easy to see this is the main movement that's the driver, because it's going to be in there more frequently. And it's going to be trained with the heavier loads. Then how is that actually waving through that load? And then see, you know, because now if it's a good author of a good program, they're going to kind of tell you in the introduction, but this is not always the case. But it will allow people to start to understand, because once you can understand that and like this is the spirit, these are the main things that are trying to be derived, that's where you have, if you want to start tweaking things yourself, leave those main things the fuck alone. Like tweak the other stuff. Yeah. You know, and that would be the first place to start.
Yeah, I can imagine like some laminated, it's like the Constitution, but you know, for lifters, where it's like these are the approved things you can fuck with your program. Leave everything alone. If you could narrow it down, but even that is going to change by program.
Yeah, I would say from the beginner, you can start from the bottom and adjust up. You got to earn the right to adjust up. And the first thing.
No matter what I can think about in terms of a program, I can always imagine it not only working more for a different type of person, but working more based on different decisions, but also probably working as well as some other program. So again, I go back to like, there's probably a lot more right answers that people think about. And I think we might get into this arena where it's a lot of navel gazing when we're thinking about things we can tweak, when in reality, and people hate this, when they're looking for insight, they want a direction. They want to say, hey, make me feel confident about my next step. And that leaves it open for, you know, exploitation and people to come in like, hey, I'll help you, you know, just, you know, come into my camp. We've got Kool-Aid over here. People do not like being told about how open-ended it is, because it can be very disorienting, and you get paralysis by analysis, and it's like the paradox of choice with fucking magazines. It's like if you give people more options of magazines, they're less likely to buy one. So even though they might be dissatisfied with the fact that there's only 5 magazines, that's an easy choice, because every time you don't do something, you're up against the cost of not making that choice. So if there's 100 potential things that choosing this one is going to deprive you of, well, that's like giving up these. And it's a weird paradoxical way of thinking, but this is how people, I think, really screw themselves with training. So if you can, I mean, you want to make things simple where you can. So starting with what the spirit is, if that's something you can derive out of the program. The most popular programs in kind of general pop culture, it's pretty easy to do with. If you have a 5-3-1 or a starting strength or you know, I don't know what the kids are. I reference like ebooks from like 12 years ago. It's like, I don't know what the kids are running these days. But if you start with that, it's pretty easy because they usually do come down to, hey, this is the money lift. Hey, this AMRAP is going to drive progress. Take it seriously. Try to beat your last numbers. Hey, we're going to deload every 4th week. It makes it for you. So it's really easy to say, okay, I need to show up recovered and go hard. Oh, week 3, that's the build up crescendo. Okay, I'm going to put a big red circle around that. Week 3, I need to make sure I come in, I take my vitamins, extra scoop of pre-workout, and I go hard as shit, you know, rain or shine. But yeah, if you're somebody who falls into what is probably more popular specialized training, it's very proper, seems very academically derived, everything seems so purposeful and deliberate, whether or not it is. My heart goes out to people that live and die by those programs because it feels like there's probably a lot that you're going to screw up at any given point. But in reality, there's probably not.
Well, the trick is, and this is where the confusion comes with content in general, is, you know, if we use the analogy of the big jar with the big rocks, then you can put, you know, pebbles in there, then you can put sand in there and water in there. But the big rocks matter the most.
Yeah.
But the big rocks are not going to get views. They're not going to get attention. They're not going to get all this other stuff. What gets the attention, and even the pebbles don't really matter. What gets the attention is the water that gets poured in at the very end. So all the stuff in the margins gets all this attention. You know, train in the stretch position, for instance. There's a lot of shit that has to happen before that, but that gets all that attention, creates that confusion to where there are these big rocks, you know, and with those big rocks, how would you define what the biggest rocks are when it comes to really training for anything that's not gen pop training, just strength training in general?
Just strength training.
Yeah.
You're not going to beat a barbell, right? For obvious reasons, the main barbell movements, and then understanding why they work. I think anything that has to do with a movement pattern has some special quality. Again, you reference length in training, exercise science, a lot of hypertrophy discussion. They look at it differently, and I feel like they make so many omissions or they fail to make connections that they probably could get from the history of strength training, especially when it comes to like not just looking at each workout in isolation, but like connecting them and understanding that what you do here influences this. And, oh, by the way, diminished returns are a thing. So you have to account for what's going to happen when this stops working. For something like a barbell, I think movement patterns have a really like special property that makes adaptation like more certain, or that it just comes in like a bigger magnitude. To start with any young bodybuilder, I mean, I think you can make the case that if you took a patch of young bodybuilders, patch of young, let's say, aspiring powerlifters or just barbell fanatics, I would think that you're just going to get rapid growth. This baseless. I have absolutely nothing to prop this up with, but I would expect to see that people that start out with something like a barbell, you're just going to see more growth faster. Now, that's not to say what long term as you figure things out and adjust your training, because obviously the biggest MFers in the world do bodybuilding style training where they're breaking everything apart and getting really granular with how they train. But even them, they probably concede that a big chunk of their progress comes from a few basic movements.
It started for sure that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you start with the barbell. Okay, I like movement patterns, good range of motion. As I build coordination, I improve my ability to produce force. It's like I earn the ability to grind, which is important. That's a part of getting into shape that people don't think about. It's like, it's not just, okay, can you push it hard, but what does it mean to get to the point where you're skilled enough at this lift that you can actually get a lot out of it? It's like, okay, you need to have money to earn money. You need to be in a little bit of shape to actually train hard enough to get strong. That goes into GPP training and all that, right? So as you get more developed, as you kind of move through your novice phase, now each single rep you do packs a bigger punch. It's going to fatigue you more. Okay. The next question is, how do I progress in a way that is sustainable that I can do long term? And from that question is what all this other shit branches out. I could do a linear progression and I could just do that forever, but it works okay in the beginning. You could probably modify it a little bit. Let's just say, okay, it's simple enough. It works good enough in the beginning. Well, why does that stop working? Because eventually, as you get stronger, the lighter weight in the beginning of a cycle doesn't do shit except detrain you. You got a couple sessions in the Goldilocks zone, and then by the time you're grinding, you can't keep grinding because each workout packs a punch, so now you can't recover. So everything that we do in training has to answer that. Okay, how do we progress in a way that's going to be sustainable, given the fact that the same shit that makes us strong is the same shit that can potentially fuck us up, accumulate fatigue, cause wear, injuries that we have to account for. And then I think that just comes down to solving that, looking at the framework of what you're working in, bring it back, simplify it any way you can conceptually to the core. And there's a million ways to skin a cat. There's a million ways to account for fatigue. It doesn't have to be a deload every 4th week. Can be, doesn't have to be. But once you know what those points are in the program you're following and how they're set, it's like answering those questions. It gets not easy, but manageable. And I think that's what a lot of people need. They need to know that the questions are manageable.
Yeah. The barbell movements for sure, the movement patterns for sure. And sometimes people get lost in the nuance of all that where, you have, say, an RDL compared to a stiff leg deadlift.
Yeah.
But, the easiest way I explain that is you have rounding movements, you have arching movements, right? So if it's a good morning, you have some where you're more neutral, you have some where you're more arched, and one's going to hit in the hamstrings harder than the glutes and vice versa. Lat pull downs, you'll have elbows out, elbows in. One's going to be more upper back, one's going to be more lat. So they'll get caught up in, oh man, what was it a few years ago where there were like 7 movement patterns and you had to train every one of these movement patterns, right? But there's new, like a vertical pull and a horizontal pull. That was kind of where some of this came from. Yeah. Like, well, what do you mean by a vertical pull? Like, I can do this 2 different ways, right? I can pull my elbows in and I can keep them out. And I'm kind of targeting 2 different things where, having a balance of those movement patterns and a progression with those patterns is part of the big rocks. There's psychological, there's biological, psychological, and social aspects that all play into that, where they all intertwine. It's like a Dr. Dwayne Jackson type of thing, where they all intertwine is where the optimal performance is. And on the biological aspect, we have our genetics, we have all those other things in there, but you could put in, that's where PEDs fall in. Recovery can fall in because now your hormones getting all fucked up because of the way that you live, the way you eat, and all this other kind of shit. The psychological pulls in not just the psychology on how you approach your training, but the social aspects. Is this your entire life? Is this all you ever do? Because then if you have a bad day, you're really fucked, in a big way, and there's balance with that. And then the physical, and in the physical, there's the technical thing, which that's the thing I see get forgotten with a lot of the people that get started. And it's interesting on that one, though, because if they're not a competitive, and this one I've kind of struggled with, say they're not a competitive strongman or powerlifter or whatever it is, and their technique, say football, their squat technique is okay. Like they're not going to get hurt, but we would look at it and say that looks like shit, right? Well, if they get 50 pounds stronger on that movement that kind of looks like shit, they still got stronger. So does it really matter if we clean it all up and just with the technical aspects of cleaning it all up, now it's 150 pounds stronger? My bias says yes, it matters because it should be a healthier, joint angle for them to be able to do that. But does it matter to the expense of the skill development they may be able to acquire for the sport they actually do?
And off one question like that, and again, if you guys don't know what a fractal looks like search a visual representation of a fractal. That's what it's like. You have, I have this complex picture, and then you pick any point, and it can just fall into infinity. But it's like you take one question like that, and where a reasonable person is like, well, there's a spectrum, and of course it's the ever present. It depends. But now you open it up for people to do what people do, which is to establish base camp on either pole of that spectrum, and they do, and build very firm conclusions about it, and you can do that with just about anything. What was that last point you just made?
The technical aspect?
The technical aspect.
With the squat.
Yeah, with the squat. So that's what sparked that thought, the technical aspect. Because if you're out of position, if you're out of line, you're going to get people saying, you're going to get hurt. You're going to wear yourself down. We can always make joint angles more optimal, right? But then on the other hand, you're going to get the people saying that, the body adapts, doesn't matter. And you can always grind this into the ground and get super granular. And what's that going to do? I go back and forth too, because my history and my relationship with deadlifting, it's a very abusive, codependent relationship I have with deadlifts. The people that are very much like the body adapts, keeping a neutral spine doesn't matter so much. It's like, we have this range that you can get into a maximal lifts. And I'm thinking of like, what other sport in the world treats their technical movements that way? But it's funny because there is such a spectrum. Like, of course, a lot of people are going to squat wonky and might be fine. And that's probably most high school, maybe even most college athletes. So if it is better, what's the margin? Is that going to provide better transfer to the sport? Is it going to depend on the person? Probably being durable is like this superpower I wish we could test for. Some people can do whatever and they stay in one piece, and it's insane, where other people are like made of Velcro and they fall apart. And that's more and more what I see with these. I'm almost starting to see them as unanswerable questions. And at the very beginning, it was like, it's important to have the conceptual understanding, because that's going to help you in your journey forward as you consider options, what you can do. But in trying to find like this grid to work off to get our bearings, it's like, I haven't found it. I don't know anybody else who has. It's mind numbing.
Well, you kind of noted this a little bit earlier when we were talking about your comeback, and that would be, essentially key indicators to be able to track if you're on the right route to where you're going, right? So if I use conjugate as an example, and we say the squat, bench, and the deadlift competitively are the main things that you're trying to train. Under those main things, what are the things that have the highest dynamic correspondence to actually push those up, right? And there'll be some variability for, individual and how that's going to be, where what you referenced were certain rep ranges at certain weights to be able to let you know where that was going to be. So for me, like close grip incline press was always 60% of whatever I was going to be able to do in the meet. So there were these different correlations to be able to help determine and push those main indicators. Where if it's collegiate strength coach working with athletes, what I'll usually ask them are what are the 5 things that have correspondence to the athlete in the sport that they're doing. Yeah. And then that becomes their squat, bench, and deadlift. And programming wise, you can either just train those intelligently, into the ground, or you can find the things that actually drive those, and kind of work upstream. So say if my close grip incline press does have that 60% correspondence, then what can I do to make my close grip incline press higher? What movements can I do to be able to push that? But that becomes a very secondary indicator. The main indicator, are those things, have that correspondence. So how did you determine the ones that you use first off? But continue with your thought before you answer that.
Well, no, that's fine. That's what I was going to ask you, because that's something that is so seemingly integral in something like conjugate, which has that frequent rotation. It's like, if you know the list of things, right, you're constantly focused on those, instead of just hammering the primary movement. You got all the things, prop it up. And I was going to ask if was there anything that looked like kind of a consistent method for sniffing those out, or was that primarily just years of doing it? You kind of connect the dots, right?
Years of doing it, and then kind of tracking them. And a lot of the things were kind of similar. A board press is a board press. I get there's a 1 board, a 2 board, a 3 board. I get that, but the movement pattern's kind of the same thing. So you would just see these correlations. What was more apparent were the ones that had no correlation. Like a kneeling squat. I think the guy I was training with, and it was Joe Amato at the time. We did like fucking 1050 for 10, and it's like after that set, it's like literally like, what the fuck? This makes no sense, man. we squat fucking 850. This makes no logical sense. This is just dumb as fuck. And so there's no correspondence there. Maybe with somebody else, I don't know, but for sure not. And then it becomes a web, that you kind of start to figure, here's where this is. And I don't want to say fortunately, because I would have done things different now, but we didn't ever train the main lifts. you know, in the competitive style, right? So you had to have something to be able to gauge if it was going to have the correspondence, because the only time you were really doing a competitive squat with wraps and single ply to multi-ply gear was in a meet, you know. So it's like, how the fuck do you ever know? And this is what I would have changed. I would have put those in is max effort movements every now and again to have a more solid indicator, because then it's, you're looking at the meet, then you're looking at those lifts and trying to see what did the floor press go up, and if it went up a lot but my bench still sucked and it wasn't some stupid technical error, it didn't correlate, well then this is stupid.
Yeah.
You know, for suspended good mornings were dumb as fuck for me. They didn't do anything for anything. Now sometimes you would know after doing the movement, you know, within 2 or 3 weeks, probably 2 weeks, if other things started to feel lighter, you know. So sometimes, and that would be a neural thing.
And you probably had a bit of sense as you were experienced enough when you did something like, I can see how this kind of, I'll even get that every now and then where I'll do something I haven't done either at all or in a very long time. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of exposing something I've let go a little. I think this is going to be something that has value. By the way it feels, where you feel the strain, or, you know, where you have to brace or position. I've gotten a couple of those. But I got to imagine every so often, one of those kneeling squat type exercises where you're like, what in the God's name, probably turned out for somebody at some point to be like just the thing. Like what's the weirdest exercise you ever did where you're like, oh, this is money? Like, I mean, I remember hearing somebody talk about their triceps and it turned out to be some high pin, ultra banded monstrosity, right? But it was like the only way that he could, you know, tax it. So then there's this other dimension of experimentation. That's something I grapple with. What's the appropriate model for reaching out just enough to find those hidden things, if it's even meaningful at all, versus doing the consistent things that you know already work? And that's a difficult question. For most of the people listening to this, I would again advise going simple, starting with the movement pattern. It's good to have a basic understanding of how it breaks down. Like it's good to be able to deconstruct movements a little bit, but you can deconstruct them into the fucking dirt to where you're not even looking at anything recognizable anymore. You're just spiraling in space. So keep it simple, deconstruct to a couple of points. And I really don't think the average person should have more than a handful of variations for their main movement. The way I program for most people, what pops up in my books is, I mean, you could call it kind of a power building style. Like, I don't know. I just think it's training, but you have your main lift, 1 or 2 variations that are a secondary lift, and I'll break those down. Just the easiest, most general way is this an advantage movement or a disadvantage movement? And there's times I like to put them in, but it probably doesn't matter that much. A disadvantage movement is going to be something where your leverages suck, or you're going through a long range of motion, so the weight's going to be lower. So you could argue better hypertrophy effect. You could argue, okay, this is going to make you stronger in your most vulnerable positions. The weight's going to be lower, so recovery, if you're doing it heavy, recovery is going to be better. Whereas your advantage shit, that's your high box squats, that's loading up, accommodating resistance, that's your strongest bench setup or floor or board. That's where the weight's going to get higher than your main movement. And even if the range is limited, even if it doesn't make you sore, it's that hit by a truck feeling you're going to get the next day. And those have I think consistently enough differentiations between them for how you can kind of predict recovery and maneuver around them. So that makes it simple in my mind. I've gotten to the point recently where I started to get in that lost in space, because I'm noticing individual qualities to help my other movements that are more complex. Like take a log press, for instance. I've, again, dachshund build, very short arms. I enjoyed pressing because it was easy and I was good at it. So I did it more than anything, and that compounded. So that was one of my first moves to ever be competitive. However, because of my build, I think my leverages made my delts develop much more than an average person would get from that lift. I literally just did push jerks and push presses twice a week for like a year and a half, and my shoulders exploded. I would not expect that for the average person. However, my triceps, little string beans, like I had like a 17-inch arm, and I was like chasing a 400-pound log press, and I had nothing on the back of my arm. And it's because my triceps really did need to do much. I jump with my legs. By the time the weight's high enough, triceps don't have to do much because I'm so leverage advantage anyways. So now it's like I'm breaking down, okay, these different, like, my ability to generate speed using my legs and then following through with my arms. So that's like a quality I'm chasing now. And then it's like, okay, my ability to, I found this exercise, man, that lockout just gets nasty strong. And then I started doing that, so my push press is going up, but then I detrained the fuck out of my bottom end, so my strict press went down. And you're trying to juggle this shit, because in your mind, you're like, I just want to be stronger. I just want everything to go. You look at the greats who like just mow over everybody. It's like, they're just stronger at everything. How do I do that? And then I almost end up with like the sympathy for the guys that their own, it's like ignorance is bliss. The guys that don't know any better. So they go in and they just go fucking hard, and their body grows, and as they grow they tend to get bigger potential. There's times where I just scratch my head and I look at everything I've ever written, and I'm like, if I was just a bodybuilder in the 70s, would I just be at like an 800-pound squat and deadlift right now? I don't know. But well,
the deconstructing thing can become this, well, if you're closed-minded, it's easy. But if you're open-minded, it can become this complex rabbit hole. To, if I go back to the close grip bench press, to the bench, anytime I would put those in on that max effort day, my speed work always felt phenomenal, right? So, and then that's the technical work. So the technical work's going to have the highest correspondence, compared to, and I was always more explosive than strong. So that was everything was the technical work at the certain percentages actually build strength. So I can look at that and say, well, this is probably because it's building my triceps because it's a steep incline. Or I can look at it and think, well, you know what? I really couldn't use more than like 275, 315, 325, maybe 355 on a good day, which compared to the board press and stuff like that at over 500 pounds, it's a way lower load. So maybe it was just the reduced load that actually had, you know what I'm saying? So when you have that open mind, you can look more broadly to be able to see maybe it wasn't the movement. Maybe it was just the reduced load. So then those other things need to be that. And then on the flip side of that, because I'm on that steep incline, I'm kind of taking my lats out of the movement. So then my stability, if I always did that too frequently, my stability on the bench would begin to suffer, because now I don't have the lats engaging in a pressing movement like I would if I was lying flat. So there's all these other variables to where people will get stuck in this. Well, Dave said 60% of close grip incline should be, and that's not the case at all, because you don't know what the fuck was the reason why. It's impossible to know what it is.
And we got two little spaces in our heads that we have to keep track of, because we have, and that's for you, right? For you as a lifter are trying to, it's like the car you've been working on for 3 decades, and you're like, I know it better than anybody, but I still don't know everything about it. Like, I'm going to figure this out. But then on the other hand, you have the things that you disseminate out into the world for other people, whether I'm working with somebody one-on-one or whether I'm doing something that I think is tailored appropriately for the masses. And that's like this entirely different thing, because this is a mistake a lot of people make, and I see it in the comments every now and then. A lot of people intuitively think that when lifters give advice or when they consider themselves authorities, it's because they themselves were successful, which I would argue is probably the worst reason to present yourself as an authority. And I mean, I've done some things I'm proud of, but I'm not setting records. I'm not winning championships anytime soon. I'm sufficiently above probably where the average viewer is in regards to strength, provided you care about strongman at all. That didn't teach me anything about the average person, let alone most people that might be watching me. So I have to go back. I have to, honestly, some of the most transformative shit that I ever went through was just being a personal trainer at a corporate gym for like 2 years, because you have the biggest diversity of people. You're not, God, you look at people, it's like, oh, I've been training for 10 years. Yeah, but only D1 athletes are better, or only people that were pre-selected for their talent. There's this question of are fast responders a thing? Is it really that if you get somebody who just is switched on, it doesn't matter what you throw at them, they're just going to be good as shit, and that's it? So then it's like, okay, what do? I can't look at the best performers, because they're all, they're all, it's not just drugs. In a world where drugs don't exist, the genetic elite are making everybody feel small and stupid and worthless. So if they already come prepackaged with all that, so what do? Look at the worst lifters? It's this impossible thing. And then you add on the layers of deconstruction. So intuition is a very powerful thing. And it's like the saying goes, all models are wrong, some are useful. whoever is watching this, your model for lifting is going to be woefully incomplete. It just is. It's going to be missing things. But you can take comfort in knowing that as long as you pay attention and are stepping forward, it's probably not going to be the thing that keeps you from getting to where you want to go.
Well, I think the way that you talked about the reps equating to, where you are in a position is going to apply for most people across the board. It's going to get nuanced for you for sure. Right, because that's going to change over time. Because I'm sure you can't take one of the old school rep calculators, and it's not going to work. But it will work for the majority of the people who are out there. Yeah. It's just once you start getting closer to, for lack of a better word, your genetic potential, to where those things are going to start to not. You need to figure out your own correlations on what those reps are, because it doesn't fit the way you think it does. But and those things, when you're looking at those things, that's going to force the individual to stay with the same movements more frequently, and, keep a total movements of maybe under 30, when they're starting. I'm talking total, for the whole microcycle or macrocycle, where, on conjugate, you'll see people that will have 200 right from the jump. And it's like, well, how the fuck do you know if you're getting better at any of these things? Where the more experience you get, the more movements can actually fold in, because there's some degree of mastery that's fallen into the other one. You can pull away from a log press for a while and come back, maybe be sloppy for a week or two, maybe, but then it's right there. Somebody who's just starting, first they need to figure out what is actually a good press, then how to do it right. And there's enough resources now that they can see it. Now, the application of what they see to what they do, as we all know, changes a little bit. So getting around people that can actually see and work with you personally will help take that to another level. But they can still get to a very, very good level now, just with tutorials and things like you've put out and other people have put out. Yeah. And should use those instead of following their favorite influencer on Instagram and trying to mimic the techniques that they do that don't have the same biomechanics that they do.
Yeah, the consumer perspective is really big, because when people complain about whether it's charlatans in the industry or all of the conflicting information out there, consumers, the people that watch the videos and read the books and so on, they have a role to play. There's a responsibility. You got to advocate for yourself, and that means understanding your relationship to the person you're deriving information from. So you got to be able to kind of look behind the curtain a little bit when somebody's giving a recommendation, like, where does this come from? Why are they prescribing it to me? I've had, and there isn't data on it that I would probably like to have. I don't know how I would go about getting that, but I've gotten a lot of good feedback from some of the programs that I've put out that have gained traction, that people generally claim to have a good experience with their first, relatively quick in the first, if it's a 4 or 5 week run and then repeat. And when I think about why it would, given all the things I've talked about what's important, your personalization, that's important. All the things I have no information about the person I'm writing a mass program for, which is their personalization. Why would it be successful? So I've really tried to make my content that appeals to a wide group of people. I've really tried to kind of get my finger on what's the culture like today? What are people likely to be doing? Where are they likely to be screwing up? What's the easiest fix I can throw at them? And that's why the things I'm writing right now, like they're not strength specific. I still think it'll make most people stronger than what they're going to do otherwise, because most people starting out don't need specificity. Mm-hmm. It's sexy. It makes them feel like they're a real true blue, authentic, card-carrying lifter. Like I'm doing my specialized training with all the gear I bought and everything, my, calibrated plates and so on. However, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say it's complicated. It's not complicated. It should be very simple. It's that the stuff that you're inclined to avoid is probably going to be the stuff you need. And it's going to be the stuff that people have been doing for a very long time. So again, simplifying where we can, basic movement patterns, full range of motion with a barbell. They're the same ones that have been around forever. If I can get people to do a lot of work, not just do a lot of work, but to adapt to more work as they're consciously trying to build up over time, either intuitively or by some pre-planned progression. the net result of that is going to be growth. And if they have the wherewithal to do it, get to the end, take notes and say, oh man, this is really good, or oh shit, this really beat me the fuck up. If they could take notes, make tweaks and so on, and carry that into successive cycles, that's like the bird's eye view of what a long-term successful training lifetime is going to look like. But again, that comes from my perspective of what I'm trying to do. And when you're looking at hundreds of different influencers, countless people, I'm sure there's people that just copy and pasted a program they got, or people that put out the things they did. Like, you know, if somebody's, I don't care if somebody's an IFBB pro, I don't care if they have a PhD, I don't care if they have an all-time world record. Like, have you trained hundreds of people one-on-one for extended period of time? If not, if your training experience is lowered, you're going to have a very limited sense of what people are doing en masse and what they probably should be switching to.
What have you seen since if we look at when the lockdowns were going on, people who like training were training more, right? So the issues that you would globally see across the board during that time are going to be different than the issues that you're seeing now. So how have those issues changed? Because you're watching it closer because you're a content creator,
yeah,
right? So you got to kind of stay on top of all that. So how have you, what have you seen change since then, as far as some of the big rocks being, I don't want to say not being done, but being turned and manipulated?
So that's a really good question. I'm certain that there was an emphasis put on certain things in like popular training culture while people were shut down, because that's exactly it. If you're at home, you're not going to work, you just got all the time in the world. I mean, shit, that's what got my YouTube channel going. I was able to hyper focus on that. So if that's a thing, it's like everybody's social life was screwed up, their mental health was screwed up. So of course, the people that like train are going to be clocking more time in the gym.
But also at that time, they were limited on what they could do. Because they were not in a gym.
Yeah,
right. So they're in a home gym, barbells, stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw Chris Bumstead on a podcast talking about how he like prepped for one of his Olympias. Like he had to go to somebody's house. Yeah, it was like dumbbells and like a cable machine, and it was like that's all he could do. Yeah, so you're limited on equipment, right? It was probably a massive benefit to like the garage gym, home gym movement, because so many people had to stock their houses now. And then they realized, oh shit, everything that I was paying a gym membership for and all the trouble I was getting at the gym, I can just sidestep that now. And when you do that, now you have less equipment. So you're kind of forced to narrow everything down. You got a power rack and a barbell, and that's fantastic. I mean, I've said for a long time, if I was stuck on an island, that's all I had, I can make it work. Yeah, I could make it work. I mean, maybe you have to get creative. Maybe there's certain problems I have a harder time solving, but from the bird's eye view, that's plenty, especially you got a power rack. Oh man. As you start to add the frills or whatever, I mean, yeah, you can round out your training more. For many people, it's a distraction. It's like they spend the money on that. Oh man, wouldn't it be sexy if I had leg extension in my garage and they never use it or whatever. So I think I have seen, I mean, like I got my Discord, my Bromley HQ Discord, check that out if you have it. But we got a pretty cool group there of people that are constantly updating their workouts and their equipment. We have a whole thread for garage gyms where people are posting some gnarly setups some of these guys have there. But yeah, you're going to see minimalism, you're going to see an emphasis on the basics, and you're probably going to see in the shutdown more work. Now, I haven't seen this directly. I'm speculating on what it would have looked like, but I would like to think that if that's the case, I had a hand in it, because that mirrors a lot of what I'm telling people to do. I mean, if you break down any of my programs, it's compound. I like the volume accessory, but if you cut that out, the program is going to be 95% the same. That's the heart of it. If you can get in and do 2 or 3 compound movements hard as fuck and do that 3 or 4 days a week, it's like, Jesus, that's going to be pretty good. And then, worrying about undertraining versus overtraining, as long as you can manage that, that's going to be good. But yeah, I can't say that I've seen anything specific in regards to that, but that's a very good point, because that absolutely had to be the case.
Dave Tate here from elitefts to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I know my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to elitefts.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu. Well, what I wonder, and I'm guessing and speculating, because now that I'm wondering, it'd be pretty easy to look. During that time period, you know, pretty much all content that was coming out was how to maximize your gains with limited stuff.
Yeah.
And 2 years removed from that, I wonder when the science-based training, you know, conversations really started to pop, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't popping then, right? It was after that, which would kind of coincide with, you know, people having the ability to be able to do more movements because now they're back in gyms, or they have more shit in their gym, or rack attachments or cables and all this other kind of stuff. And if that kind of helped grow that whole science-based growth, boom, which is kind of, we're right in that now, right? So it's probably at its peak, you know, and everything goes in trends. You've been around long enough to kind of know how the trends work, where that will kind of come back down, and then it will be all basic barbell shit again, and then you know, we'll kind of fluctuate back out.
Ripito will have his last laugh. Okay, so that's actually a good point. I hadn't considered that. Now that I think about it, you're right. I think the exercise science movement, I think it has been popping off recently. Nipper's been popular for a good while. But he himself, I don't think, has a degree specifically in exercise science. He's just a guy that would do the, you know, every video you can find 10 studies about it. You just make the video about that. Then you get to put science explained, and you're going to get 10 times as many people clicking on the video. I generally like Nipper. I've criticized him in the past just for that maneuver, because that's completely done for clicks. The information wouldn't really be different. The presentation of being able to put science on something makes people think of this really precise it's a validation people are looking for. Oh, I know this is the concrete answer A, as opposed to the vague things that we give, it depends, but also it's science approved, so they vetted it. It's good. That's what people intuit. So anyways, that's why it does well. Jeremy Ete is another guy. He's been around for a while. Jeff Cavalier has been doing that for a while.
Yeah, good point.
But I really think right now, I know Israel saw just a huge amount of growth in the last couple of years, primarily for, I think he started doing the celebrity reaction videos, which just took off. And it was a brilliant move to attach training to popular culture. You can really widen your breadth like that. So he took off, RP took off, and now they're starting to bring in other people. You got like Milo and Pac, whatever, and it's a bigger discussion. Now, I think part of it taking off is also part of the pushback, which I'm probably a big part of. I like to think so anyways, but then you got like the Boogs coming out and, you know, calling people out on the pencil neckery. And he's such a unique, entertaining character that he could just make video after video after video in his fucking living room, just ranting about Nibbert or whoever else. And it doesn't get old, and he doesn't seem bitter. And it doesn't, if I did that, they'd be like, did somebody check in on Bromley? Is his mental health okay? He's falling apart.
Yeah, well, it fits his personality. So it all plays together real well.
Completely, yeah. I wonder if that did have a correlation to the shutdowns. That's a really good question. I'm not entirely sure about that. Regardless of the answer, it has to be stopped. That's all I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always going to be that yin yang. You know, it kind of goes back and forth with that, because with the science-based stuff, that you can't study every variable concurrently, and that's what the human organism is.
Yes.
Is every variable concurrently. You know, and that becomes very nuanced and so forth. And now you said Bugs with that, him standing in front of his TV. I mean, it just cracks me up on so many different levels on how this is done. You know, where, you know, he's not layering it. You know what I'm saying? It could be like a Zoom thing in the corner and so forth. And
Yeah.
it's just like, no, fuck it. I'm going to watch
Oh,
my
no
TV.
editing, nothing, no production.
No,
It's
just-
like, I saw that, I was almost like offended. I was like, the audacity that, you know, it's like I got green screens and I'm doing all this shit with different cameras. I find that interesting on like 9 different levels, because there's the ideological aspect, the cultural relevance. But then as a creator, I'm like, this whole presentation, it just works so well. Because anytime you can do something you love, if I could just film myself in the shower talking to myself, just yelling at nobody and nothing, and have that take off, that'd be ideal. I just do what I love. But it's like, no, I'm not. That's not interesting. So you gotta add the ribbons and the stuff to it, whatever. But and the exercise science stuff is like, it's like, I want to say it's nice that people are taking an interest in like kind of, I want to say, authentic roots of training, which would be like biological organisms, the adaptive process, what we know about how the human body works. That's an important baseline understanding. The criticisms would be kind of over 3 territories. It'd be the limitations, like you said, that's just it. You take a fraction of the granularity that we got into with still a bunch of uncertainty throughout this conversation, and apply that to any research. Like, your study on a variable doesn't mean anything if it's not in the context of the way you're going to be training, the person you're going to be training, that person's training history. You know, are they habituated to it? That's a dimension of anyways. So there's the limitations. Then there's the presentation, the way that the speakers are giving it. And I take issue with that for, not with everybody. There's some good dudes out there, but I think there's not a lot of rigor in reeling that in. And I think it's like some Dr. Oz, like Women's World, trash tabloid levels of titles coming out that, considering what watch time is for the average 45-minute video, you know, people aren't getting to the nuance. They're seeing they're seeing the big punch at the beginning. And then lastly, I talked about consumers having some responsibility, and they do. And I think the people that tend to gravitate towards that type of content probably have a lot of misconceptions, not just about the way the academic thing does in fact go down, but how training's actually put together and what's actually important, and can all this stuff fill in any of these gaps in a meaningful way for me, given the amount of time it takes to pour through the research. So anyways, it's like, it's this big kind of mess, but it comes in cycles. And I mean, you could be charitable and say, hey, it's a sign that people are interested in training. They want to know more. That's probably true.
Well, unless I'm missing things, and which could 100% be possible, it seems like most of those videos are all hypertrophy based.
They are,
like they're not strength based. And so now, I mean, you get into the strength based, you are starting to fall into more periodizational demands, you know, because of all that. I mean, hypertrophy for us is just like a block, right? Where you're taking, in contrast to that, it would be akin to if all this stuff was just on explosive development with the barbell for weightlifting, and that was it. But that's not sexy. That's not going to appeal to most people. Or maximal strength development, or the conditioning that's required to be able to train for a strongman at that granular level.
Sure.
So they're taking one, from what I see, it's just one bio ability, more or less, biomotor ability, and just doubling down on that, because most people are just training for hypertrophy. Granted, it should still be phasic, which is not really ever presented.
I think they do this thing where, I know they do this thing, and I'm not saying it's malicious, but it still has a similar effect of being kind of misleading, where if your entire mode of making content hinges on the fact that, hey, I have this degree, I have insight into how all this academic stuff works that you might be into and you might benefit from, come watch me in my videos, you're going to spend time on the things that they're actually doing. You're going to spend time engaged in the questions they're trying to answer. You're not going to spend time on the things that haven't been addressed at all, period. And in what people have described as a discipline that's in its infancy, then maybe, there's big gaps. There's things that they haven't gotten to yet, if they ever do get to it. So that's an interesting question. I mean, we kind of alluded to it earlier on, where it's like, if you look at the totality of strength sports and strength training, and you look at the totality of hypertrophy, even though we're both trying to get physical adaptations from moving weight, and we know that there's a lot of things that cause both of them, it's strange that we take for granted that, well, of course, strength training would be phasic. And even removing competition prep, even if you take the directionality out of it, there's still an acknowledgement that what happens in the first couple weeks is different than the next few weeks, is different than the next few weeks after that. Even the people that don't know any better and they just put their head down and run through the brick wall, they still will organically, whether they're aware of it or not, make changes. They'll react to what happens that can constitute a change that allows some growth to happen. And it's coming from both ends, your body adapting, but you also only doing what your body will allow you to do. And eventually, in a very sloppy, painful, maybe injury-riddled way, you do get better by doing that. But we think, okay, we can do better. Let's have some directionality. Let's have some phasic stuff. I don't really see any compelling reason why hypertrophy would be different. It seems intuitive that it would. Diminished returns is still a thing.
Yeah.
It's like habituation is a thing. And there are so many damn things that cause hypertrophy where you can focus on some and not others. And then, it's like, why wouldn't that be a thing? And then when you add on top of that, I mean, people want to be big. They want to be big everywhere. If you're a bodybuilder, you want to be big everywhere. Well, if you have a bodybuilder who's trained their balls off for 15 years, let's say they get a pro card, but they want to be competitive at the top. And they're like, man, I'm big as shit. I got 250 pounds of lean mass, but you know what? My arms kind of suck. I need to add like 1.5 inches on my arms to be competitive with the other guys. Well, what's any rational person going to tell that guy to do? Probably go through a specialization phase. Probably tell him to bring everything else back down to maintenance, because you'll maintain it by doing very little. You don't have to do a shit ton of volume to maintain. You do very little work and then double up on like that. That's what a lot of people do. They do specialization phases. Well, that's an aspect of rotation. Your volume doesn't stay the same week to week. I mean, I guess the HIIT followers would say, no, you got to do biceps once every 14 days and you'll just grow like a weed. But most people that want to be good are chasing that. So that all lends itself to the cyclical nature. And that's probably one of the biggest gripes that I have, is that it only talks about the workout today, how stimulating it is or isn't, which I think is a very flawed and limited way to talk about training, even hypertrophy training. And it absolutely is the case that I'm a strength guy critical of hypertrophy discussion. But I also think it's not entirely complete, because I would argue very few people really are only hypertrophy focused. Yeah, they want to be bigger, they want to be aesthetic, but most people that lift weights, strength is like, most people, if you're like, okay, well, you could be, this big, but you're only going to bench your body weight for a couple reps. Or you could be, let's say, that big, but a little bit lower, but you could have like a 500-pound bench. Like, when people start to calculate what that potential package could look like, most people would bias towards strength. And because they go, not bias towards strength, but they would want that to be part of the final outcome. And because it's so easy to do both, I think a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards these recommendations and all of the implications around it. When in reality, a more well-rounded program that does take into account that directionality and the rotation probably would be better suited.
I've had somebody explain to me, actually a few people explain to me, a difference between what they would consider strength hypertrophy and like bodybuilding hypertrophy.
Okay.
And the example would be, if it's, lower end movements that you're doing for sets of 10 and you're doing it for strength, you're going to put more force into it. You're going to be worried about moving more weight. Getting to the nuances of the ranges of motion isn't going to matter as much. You just want to move the fucking weight in that repetition range to become stronger in that range for the strength endurance purposes that may or may not carry over to that 1 rep max. And on the other end of that would be the movements that maybe with a little bit slower tempo. From the stretch position, you're not exploding out of that. You're just kind of, flexing and then building a little bit of momentum, maybe a peak contraction and so forth. So I understand the difference between those two, right? I've not heard it explained any better way than kind of how that was. And I can see the nuance, for a strength athlete, how the difference between the two could play a role. Early in the training phases, you might go to the heavier one. When you start to get beat up, you might go to the other one because it would be less load and just more joint friendly. Where I don't know from the hypertrophy standpoint how much difference is going to be made between the two. Now, in the weeds, there's going to definitely be people that are going to argue and benefit of both of those. Yeah. But with your own training and your own experience, have you manipulated those variables in such ways?
So I've never been specifically focused for hypertrophy, with the exception of, I could probably count them on one hand, a handful of really long contest blocks where I went crazy. I mean, I had my initial training when I was a teenager, I mean, before I even knew what a Powerlifting USA was or where to find it, all I had were bodybuilding mags. So that training early on was by default bodybuilding training. I thought, oh, that's just how you train. You want to get well-rounded. You want to do all these different movements. And there was like kind of just a general method of execution that didn't look stupid, and that's what we went for. We didn't think about it much besides that, and I grew muscle, but I was always focused on my numbers. I figured out pretty early that, okay, that's cool, but this is in service of me moving more weight. People will pull those goals apart to the point where they might really just want one or the other and not care about the overlap. But I always wanted an overlap with a bias towards strength. And then as I got better and better and better and filled out my weight class, I mean, I was kind of sufficiently big. Like, I don't actually want to be more muscular anymore for the sake of it. So now it's in service of weak points, and that's where I'm at right now. So going back to my triceps have grown quite a bit in the last couple of years, still nowhere near where they need to hit the log press I want to hit before I retire. So that's like a perfect example. Similarly, when my shoulders let me bench and I'm chasing a bench, I'll do a lot of things focused on pecs, because I've done 20 overhead presses for every one bench. So my pecs are like woefully underdeveloped. With working for my triceps, I think a lot about that dynamic, because that's probably the one part where I'm really focused. My hamstrings a little bit with deads, I'll do the same thing, but focusing on the position, where I'm at, what the rep tempo's like. One, how's that going to grow generally? Because I'm not trying to do a specific type of growth, because I honestly don't think I have that precision. I don't think I have that surgical ability. So I'm like, I just fucking need them bigger. And I just need to practice what I'm going to be using it for frequently enough to get that carryover. So as long as I'm regularly deadlifting and I'm doing aggressive hamstring work, I've never been too concerned about the type. That's not to say it doesn't matter. It might matter, but it's like, do I have that information? Would I be better off trying to figure out if it does? Stretching, I find, works fantastically well. Gets me sore as shit. There's some exercises that have a good stretch that I really like. I'm inclined to believe it's because I'm not used to doing them, more so than there's some magic ability there that in all circumstances, over all programs, over every point in your training lifetime. I'm like, really, if somebody's been stretching like crazy for a decade, like, what if you switch to something you're not used to? Or what if you blend them? Is there a case to be made that the powerlifting versus range of motion, bodybuilding type hypertrophy, like, could they complement each other? Does one do something the other doesn't? Like, could you make the case somebody would be better blending them? Or, like, I don't know. And these are questions that haven't really been answered. So for me, I feel like it's precise enough to know that my triceps suck.
Yeah. And
I feel like the ways to get them to not suck are pretty straightforward. So I haven't really gotten too granular. I've been incorporating, like, I've been doing the old, like, Pat Casey type of skull crusher, where I do like the pullover with the big stretch at the top. And I really like those, because picking it apart, it's like, okay, I get the stretch, but I'm not doing the obnoxious full stretch where it's like, that's where I initiate this really controlled contraction, because even if that grows me, I'm not fostering any strength gains except in my absolute weakest position that I honestly don't give a shit about. Yeah. So I'm getting the benefit of a stretch, but using momentum and coming up into a pullover. That brings us to another topic that I'm sure people won't agree on, is does momentum have a role? Like I said, I loved push pressing because it exploded my shoulders, but I do push pressing in a way that very few people do. I do blocks, and I do them for repeating sets of like 10 or 12, and I go hard as shit, and I progress them. People love croc rows, you know? Shit ton of momentum there. Is it something about the upper back? Is it really a submaximal movement that's just been blown up? Who the hell knows? But I feel like there's a reason to believe that there's a lot of value there, not just for strength, which there is. You're moving quickly, a lot of rate of force development. But I believe there's something there that hasn't really been tapped on that is unique for hypertrophy, which is the reason that you tend to see these movements persist, even though you would think the direction of exercise science or other schools of thought would have made them obsolete, and they really haven't.
Well, with your tricep example, it's there's different ways that you can say, okay, the triceps are the weak point, but what may be the most effective to train the triceps may be an overhead dumbbell French press, right? Where in your brain you're going to think, yeah, but is that going to have the correspondence or the load to be able to transfer for what you're going to want to be able to do?
Exactly.
You know, so then it gets, brought into that other range there, to where there's like a rabbit hole. Like the counter argument could be, you still use that main thing to be able to build the triceps, then maybe put in some real light sets to get through that extended range. Almost only for the loaded stretching to be able to help the tendon in that stretch position with very light weight.
Yeah.
But that's not going to make that press per se stronger. It might make the tendon a little bit stronger, or a little bit less vulnerable to injury. if something goes astray, and that's typically how the injuries happen, right? It isn't, well, actually, we'll talk about that, because with your history of injuries and coming back now, so your training is going to be different than what it was 15 years ago when it was, more meathead, just throw a bunch of shit around, because of the injuries. And it's not, there's the overuse injuries, which they're going to happen. I mean, it's just kind of part of the process. It's just, you want them to happen as close to the competition as possible. Not at all would be amazing. I've never known anybody for that to actually be the case, because that is part of peaking, right? Is, overreaching and then deloading to be able to come in there. But then there's the catastrophic injuries, which some are avoidable, some aren't. So how's your training changed to be able to not get fucked up, more or less?
So I've made a handful of really deliberate decisions to that end, because I had an aggressive run of back injuries for about a decade. And that forced me to say, okay, something's got to give. Either I'm not going to be lifting anymore, or I'm going to fix my shit and do something that's sustainable. I'm still not entirely sure how much of the changes I made were just kind of superstitious, and if there were other things I could have done while maintaining kind of specificity or whatever. Really, my default maneuver was to avoid the heaviest loading, which is kind of paradoxical. You want to get stronger, and then there's a school of thought that'll tell you, well, you need to get the tissues acclimated. But holy hell, if every time I do a deadlift, whether I'm doing it twice a week, once every 10 days, if it seems like every dozen workouts or so, something pops, something tweaks, quality of life tanks, it's like, okay, that's not sustainable. So I've looked at the movements. I've probably taken movement variations seriously more recently. And I think that was a big hole in my game, because before I loved the specificity of doing the same movement, the skill acquisition, in addition to the effort and the intensity. But if I could just frequently practice the same thing, then you get super, super dialed into that thing. And that's a crux of like Olympic lifting works that way. You can make parallels between that and like push pressing, which is a main lift for mine. A little difficult to pull that over to squatting and deadlifting, but I think it can be done. But movement variations are huge. And it's like, okay, why are movement variations huge? And this gets into the reasoning. There's a whole other rant I could go on with people that try to present their overly simplified certain answer as to why people get injured. Oh, it's all load management. It's like one of my worst back injuries was with like 315 on a speed rep. You know what I mean? Like half of them were from heavyish attempts where I was grinding, getting out of position, which led me to believe that position was relevant, even though there's people that'll push back against that. And then some of the other ones were like inexplicable. Just recently, like last year, I was doing a stiff leg deads, and it was my first rep with like 405. And it wasn't devastating, but I didn't pull for couple weeks, and for about 2 months I would wake up 5 or 6 times in the middle of the night, because every time I turn over it's like I'm getting stabbed in the back. So something you want to avoid if you're trying to get as strong as possible. So anyways, assuming that my shitty leverages make it just so that my lower back takes on a bit more stress from standard loading protocols compared to, let's say, the average person, and it's not just some genetic weirdness of the structure of my lower back, okay, well, I can handle that. I can work around that if I move things in that make my leverages better. I talked about that a little bit earlier. In addition to that, keeping a handle on weight. That's what I did earlier on. Is I got a bad taste in my mouth over singles, doubles, and triples. For the longest time, my training was very heavy on reps. Either I do a bunch of sub-max, almost warm-up sets, and then hit an AMRAP on the last set, or I would do repeating sets of 8, 10, 12 reps. For everything. I mean, if you think you can't do 5 sets of 12 on deads, you can. You're not going to be using the weight you want to use, and it's going to feel like shit, but you can do that, and you can grow from that. So that's one of the reasons that I was able to fix out my shitty technique, because I actually spent enough time with manageable loads reinforcing a brace and getting a deliberate posture, which is something I wish I did a lot earlier in my career. That's also why my motor is so good. I mean, earlier you made a comment about rep max calculators. Mine is skewed like crazy. I mean, I think like at my best, I think I could have deadlifted 605 for like 12 or 13 reps, like pausing on the floor in between each one. I don't think I've ever been capable of over like a 750 deadlift, like if I were to guess. Where there's guys that, I mean, I've beaten guys that had like 850 pulls in contests because they do anything over 6-7 reps and that's it. But that's my training. That's where I was focused. So benefit of that, muscles grow, they got bigger. So I think my potential for strength is a bit higher. Technique's a little bit better. However, I have had a nasty problem with me specifically trying to taper into those specific ranges where I get the strain, where it's like, okay, I got my base technique, but that's not the same as your base technique when you're at 98%, 100%. And that's what I need to drill more of. Historically, I've had long runs staying in one piece. If I can make most of the reps move crisp with good speed, with good control, if I could put a cap on how many grind, I really never miss reps. I very rarely miss reps. And I focus instead of load, weight, effort, which is important. It's a nasty driver for growth, which is why it's important, especially on a simplified program you're given to the masses. Yeah, more people need to work harder. That's absolutely a thing. But for me, not focusing on the sledgehammer that's going to drive growth, instead looking under the hood, and I conceptualize kind of like a pyramid. Like there's all the weights I could do going up to whatever a top set is, and then all the weights I could do on the back down, on the way back down. My goal over time is to move whatever that top set is up by some way, or to expand the area under the curve by doing more sets across. It doesn't matter exactly what the number is. It doesn't matter exactly if I do the same weight or change. As long as in my head that triangle is expanding, that constitutes more volume, more intensity, more tolerance to those weights, and I'm going to have a lot more certainty and comfort with those weights, which in my mind translates to fewer injuries, fewer shit going sideways. And then there's a question of, okay, but what's the threshold? Am I doing that with 10s, 8s, whatever? I'll kind of keep it to kind of a narrow band of reps when I'm working on it. But even more recently, moving into lower rep ranges, that's been working very well, as long as I get out of my head that I need to do RPE 9.97, you know, I need to be tracking the speed to make sure it's right in that grinded sweet spot. I still keep them crisp. I still keep them moving well. And then because of the injuries, I got scar tissue, I got inflammation. So that's the other side. It's like, okay, what tissues specifically are being stressed and what state are they in right now? And that can change the whole damn workout, because if my lower back's inflamed and feels like there's scar tissue getting yanked or a tweak is coming or I'm not secure off the floor, I'm not going to keep pushing no matter what. But having that model in my head, there's a million ways to keep expanding that curve without taxing myself in the same way. So recently, that's given me a lot more tools.
So when you're talking variation, how much deviation from the main movement are you talking the variation of?
I have a pretty simple list. So like for deadlifts, for instance, because that's my most like injured area, I have a pretty simple list of movements that I rotate to that are productive, and I know if they're doing well, my pull's probably good, although I'm not 100% certain on the causality, because oftentimes I'll go to them and they're already good, and it's like, well, I've gotten strong from other shit, but I think it's very much circular. I stick to that kind of advantage, disadvantage dynamic, and I try to keep kind of even spreads of them in. Like I'm not going to do 12 weeks of RDLs only and then think I'm going to come back and just kill it. Even though RDLs for me hit a specific weak spot that I struggle with if I'm just deadlifting, and that's the mid part where I'm exposed. Because I got short legs, I start very upright on deadlift. I use a ton of leg drive, so quads are active, I get that push. Once that push goes away, now my hips are back and I'm exposed and my hamstrings take the entire load, and that's that dead spot up until my knee. And then for whatever reason, I credit strongman for this, for whatever reason, I'm like 20% stronger above the knee. I mean, I don't even hitch anymore because I don't have to. So as long as I get over my knee, I'm good. So RDLs help with that. So I say, okay, my hammies have to be stronger. I'm dead on the mid spot. My extension's got to grow. My glutes are plenty strong. My lockout's strong. I need my hammies to grow. So that's a good developmental exercise, and I'll sprinkle it in while I'm going. If I'm looking at a specific movement, let's say I'm in a block peaking for a meet and 8 weeks out, I'm trying to, I just, Worlds is in 4 weeks. I just got to a message right now that I got an invite. So I got 4 weeks to prep for Worlds. And they decided to throw, usually it's a deadlift for reps. So I'm like, yes. And then they throw a Trump deadlift in and it's like 750. And I'm like, fuck. So I got 4 weeks to try to prep for this without destroying myself. So all of this is very timely and relevant to me right now. So, I mean, let's just use that as an example. I'm 4 weeks out. My numbers are pretty good. I'm pretty strong right now. A little bit to do with fat fucking myself over October once I started wheeling out the pumpkin pies. But numbers are good. So I'm going to, for deadlifts, I don't have to really deadlift from the floor. If I'm moving a couple inches above or below, my deadlift's probably going to be all right. Now, if I'm swapping out trap bars, probably not. If I'm just doing like RDLs, probably not. But even if I'm just doing accommodating resistance, probably not. So I'll alter the movements higher or lower because I'm not going to deadlift, then do an elevated deadlift, then do like, I got to be sparing with my exercise selection. So if I'm going to get a variation, it'll be higher or lower by a certain margin. So those I consider pretty similar because there's direct carryover. If I'm making my leverages a lot better, to where I can either handle more weight or handle the same weight without fucking myself up. So that would be like, I just started experimenting with like frog stance deadlifts. I can get a lot more upright, use a lot more leg drive. My lower back feels amazing. Even though I get shit because of every negative thing I've ever said about sumo deadlifting in the past, every time I post that. But again, that's probably just different enough because it feels better because I'm not in the same position, taxing the same structures the same way. So that's probably not going to be something that's going to carry over to my main lift. Right above the knee, or sorry, right at the knee. I don't go above the knee. Right at the knee, where I have to move it like a half inch before I can clear my knee and go into my lockout. That was a good one. I had to do that for the silver dollar deadlift I had to prep for regionals a few months ago. And that had a ton of carryover because I'm just pitched over enough where now my back has to stay tight, which has historically been a problem here, and that felt really good. Probably not going to supplement a full deadlift. So if I'm looking for a max axle deadlift from the floor, my main lift is probably going to be an elevated or deficit somewhere in where I think my weak spot is going to be. I'll probably rotate it, and I'm probably going to follow it up with an accessory that's less specific because I'm not going for maximum specificity. I need enough specificity to foster whatever adaptations I make, into that funnel. And then the stuff on the outside has to shore up where I think I'll benefit immediately. And with 4 weeks, I need it fucking immediate. I'll probably be doing an emphasis on high deadlifts right at the knee, right below the knee, because I need load. I need comfort with sheer fucking load, and I'm most vulnerable right before the bar gets over my knee. So that's probably going to have a lot of carryover for me. And I'll probably, to just light my hammies need to grow like I need to breathe air. So I'll probably maintain RDLs, even though it's very much a developmental kind of non-specific movement. That's my specific thing, and that's kind of how I put it together.
So looking at the competition, because you have one here in 4 weeks, I have a segment here that's toxic competitive in strength sports, right?
Yes.
So my pull quote is you saying striving for greatness shouldn't mean sacrificing your health or relationships. Real champions know when to compete and when to care. And I'm sure that wasn't always the philosophy that you had, going way back, but that's evolved over a period of time. So speak a little bit more on that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. I have absolutely changed my perspective, but probably for different reasons. I feel like a lot of the mindset, I think a lot of people have a misconception about how they develop their beliefs. A lot of people, I think, are under the illusion that they have these really good airtight beliefs, and then they logically build up every action they do from that. And it's usually the exact opposite. And it's like any investigation into psychology kind of reinforces this, that we got a lot of shit going on under the hood, and we kid ourselves a lot. A lot of times we do what's intuitive and then form our beliefs after that. I definitely went through the self-serious lifter phase, not because I was a good lifter. Like I follow Greg Panora, and he does a lot of pose daily, and I like soaking it up because it's sarcastic and it's shit talking, and a lot of it's like kids these days, but also like he's aware of the scoop. So even when he's, and I don't know him, but he seems like a guy that even when he took himself seriously, there was probably that recognition that acknowledged kind of it's like, yeah, I'm doing this and I'm fucking myself up 10 ways over here, but that's what you do. Where I think a lot of people will romanticize, no, like this is the only thing that matters in life. I had my self-serious phase. I see people do that all the time. I'm really quick to like nip it in the bud because I think if you are overly serious, you're in one of two camps. You're either not going to do the things you desperately want to do or think you can do. So you're being a self-serious prick in service of this kind of delusion you've built up. And usually it's the aesthetic that draws those people in. They like the thought of looking like a big lifter or a really developed, like, muscular person. Not to say lifting attracts insecure people. That's obviously not true at all. Or there's somebody who is very talented. There's somebody who actually stands a chance of getting to the next level. And then it's a question of, like, whether or not that self-seriousness helps you or if it's a detriment. There's a lot of people that will try to protect that perspective that, well, that's what champions do. And I think that's a lot of cope. I think that's a lot of kind of enabling yes man behavior. I don't think that's the case at all. If you are such a person, for that to be true, you would have to be such a person that the difference between you getting as good as you could be and not is like burning your whole life down. There is no goal, nothing you do in life exists isolated on an island. Everything's connected to everything else. What that means is you can't squat if you can't stand on your own 2 feet. You can't enter a bodybuilding show unless you have a means of getting food that's going to feed, right? Like, this network that you exist in, it has to be able to support what you're trying to do. So that means you need to be able to, like, walk and chew gum. You need to be able to train, but also maintain the things that support and nourish you. Now, I understand completely that the amount of time, effort, and selfishness it takes to put in the work requires a sacrifice from the people around you, requires a sacrifice from you, and there's going to be things pulling on you. But you can arrange your life in such a way where you don't have to be the dysfunctional prick. Like, I don't know, if you're a young person and you know that about yourself, I want to spend the next 5 years lifting and being as good as I can, or playing football, or whatever it is, and I don't have time for shit. Okay, well, don't get in the relationship where you're going to be the abusive prick to your girlfriend because you're mad that she's taking up time. Like, you're in control. You can arrange your life. And it's the difference between people who are conscientious and people who aren't. And not to say I'm any shining example. I think we all struggle with this greatly. But as far as who we set our role models to, the ones that give themselves a pass to take liberties with other people, to bend the rules, to kind of take up all the oxygen in the room when they can. I feel like there's something underlying there. And I think it's very much, if you were to just take the entire sample of the human population, those types of people, I think, become champions much, much less often than the types of people that can kind of balance things in a healthy way.
Well, it's an interesting concept to me because it's like this concept of all in. Like, what 20 years ago, what I thought my all in was, you know, I gotta go back further. I'm older than that. So say 30 years ago, you know, what I thought was all in at that time was 100% all in. But now, knowing all the variables that contribute to the success of all that, I was only all in on the things I conveniently wanted to be all in on.
Funny how that works out, huh?
Yeah. I wasn't all in on the nutritional aspect. I wasn't all in on learning how to optimize the PEDs in a more effective way. I wasn't more, you know, all in on making sure that my blood work was optimal for recovery. You know, it's all these other variables to be all in on. But selfish prick, I was, you know, the most important thing. Everything else, I'm not dating anybody unless you realize this is going to come first. You know, all those other. So my social environment wasn't all in, because now I kind of am alienating people that could be the people that are your largest cheerleaders and your biggest supporters to be able to help drive all that. And I think all great lifters go through this little evolution. Sometimes they never learn, but sometimes they'll learn on the ass end of their career, and like, holy fuck, you know, I'm way better now because, you know, I spend less time in the gym. I spend, you know, my relationships are good. I got people that support what I'm doing. You know, I'm in hell. I'm not stressing about work. I'm not stressing about, you know, trying to juggle 5 different girlfriends at one time, you know, and all this other stuff.
Completely. There's, God, there's so much there. Men tend to have a problem with, emotional, God, what's the term? Like resolution, as far as like being able to see the resolution in great detail of like the spectrum of emotion, where we tend to collapse everything down into anger. It's like, you know, my girlfriend cheated on me. It's like, oh, how do you feel? I'm angry. It's like, oh, my dog died. Oh, how do you feel? I'm angry. It's like that's kind of thing. And part of it is a bit biological, part of it's a bit social. And then on the spectrum of like dysfunction, you're going to see that really played into with people that have the worst coping skills and so on. And you end up just kind of using that, playing into that. And that becomes the only thing you think about when, not just when you're fighting against something, but when you're chasing something. Like, it's kind of weird to think about, right? Use anger, like you're digging up old shit to keep yourself going. It's like you're pushing everybody else away with all that. There was something I experienced while my wife was pregnant that was, I mean, you think you've done a lot, and it's like, okay, I kind of know my way around this, especially with the connections I draw between lifting and the rest of my life. And then this blindsided me. It was like kind of, it was close to a religious experience I think I've had. I was lifting one day, and we were in Texas. We had a nice house we didn't think we could have even gotten a couple years before, let alone like actually be in. And it's like, my wife has a job with people she likes, and we live in this nice neighborhood, and it's like we're caught up on our bills, and my wife's pregnant, and we tried for a kid. That's not something that just happened. Like, it was like, oh, we've been together 6-7 years, nothing's happening. Okay, we got to go through the avenues. It's like, we had the talk, this is our goal, this is what we want. It was very much connected to us. And it's like all these things are coming together. And I remember I had this workout where I was like overcome with like gratitude and just like kind of real contentedness in a way that I've never experienced before, where it's like, I mean, if this is like where I am complete, if like this is a finish line, like I'm okay with that. Like, I checked off enough things. And the sense I felt more than any NO explode fueled like rage fest where I'm thinking about people that slighted me in high school, more than any amount of rage I've been able to summon, that moment I felt invincible. That was one of the best workouts I ever had too. And it wasn't marked by the grunting and sweating and screaming and slapping myself in the face. It's very internal. But it's like you said, going all in 100%. It's a simple way to think about it. It's a nice, you know, tagline on a t-shirt, but going all in 100%. I mean, if it really is that, this is 100%, that means everything else drops to nothing. And that 100% just shoots you in the foot. And that becomes unsustainable. It becomes the worst of all options. Oh, and by the way, you're fucking miserable the whole time. And that's honestly why I think that you're probably going to see, of all the talented people that might be vying for the top spot, I have to believe that most of them have a minimum amount of, I would say, maturity and like coping skills when it comes to that. And I think it really is the fan base and the viewers that see the people that are kind of notorious assholes and turn it into kind of a romanticism of, well, that's true masculinity. It's kabuki. It's somebody's misguided idea of what masculinity is when they don't have an actual role model standing in front of them.
Well, that's the interesting thing is there's an influence that we have, you know, mentors, or they just say role models. So you got mentors, you got educators, you got coaches, you know, training partners and so forth. And those matter. Where I'm pausing is now we have a lot of people that are not training with other people, you know, so it is online coaches. So the online coaches then do become, you know, these mentors, in some ways role models as well. And sometimes with a lot of them, I don't think they understand the significance of the position that they're actually in, you know, or even as an educator or a practitioner or whatever it's going to be. And I've thought about this a lot to try to put some kind of value, you know, on that. And if you think back through your, we can say your whole life, but we'll just narrow it down just through your training experience and competitive experience. There's going to be some memories that are going to just pop immediately, right? And some people will discount those memories. Other people will say, hey, on your deathbed, you're not going to remember these things, but you are, right? But then how do we put a value on those memories, right? Where if we look at one of the more significant ones, let's say that took you 15 years, you know, to be able to do, and all the education that you had to derive, or all the clients you had to derive, all the experience you had to derive. Let's just make it a low number and say 40 hours a week, you know, over 15 years at $30 an hour. That's $1 million memory, right? So if there was somebody, a coach, that was helping you to facilitate that memory, right? They helped to facilitate $1 million memory, right? That memory, those memories that you have, they don't depreciate. They're going to become stronger and go with you for the rest of your life. And that's when you give a fuck, about the goals or that person specifically has. And it's a weird balance, when you're in those roles, right? Because you want to be compensated, adequately for those roles financially, right? But we forget that there's also this other compensation side, which is more spiritually or more in your soul or so forth, just to realize, it's just a small part, very small part to help somebody have this $1 million memory, right? But just realizing to yourself that these memories, have the value of that, right? So then moving forward, with what you're training for, is that going to be one of those? Because you don't remember every training session, right? You remember some really shitty ones too, right? But that shows value even in the really hard things that you had to go through. Just because you remember those, you remember them because there was probably something that came out of those that shaped who you are. You also had a lot of hard shit that you went through that you can't remember anymore unless you really think about it. Probably didn't learn from that one. Probably didn't help shape you.
Yeah, the memory bank that I have, the ones that pop up throughout the day, there's like 10 cringe-inducing memories of some epic failure to every like really good. I have to dig for the good ones. I think part of that's conditioning myself.
Yeah.
My early mentors, I think, were really good, and I think it's beneficial. It sounds bit dysfunctional, but I think it's beneficial to have somebody that checks you to make sure you don't celebrate too long. When you did something, and eventually that got, I don't know if I talked about him last time. And I don't talk about him enough. I don't think I give him enough credit because he was a huge mentor for me. That was Scott Brengel at East West Strength in Costa Mesa. He put out like 8 pro strongmen from just this little gym. And when I went there, he was in an apartment in Costa Mesa where we did farmer walks up his hill. And I'm not kidding. It was like a 20-degree grade. Like it felt like that. And then, that grew into a little gym, but just so much information, so much talent came out of there, but beyond methodology. And I think this feeds into this now. It's like the methodology is important. It's what we're talking about. It's what we like talking about. The psychological and social aspect, you brought that up earlier, is so huge. And what you believe about what's important about what you do and why you're here. And one of the reasons he was good is he put that cap on everybody that came through. The first day there, you do the death medley. Why? Because everybody fucking hates the death medley. Everybody's out of shape. Real good way to fuck yourself up, get really, really strong, and then come in really bad shape and then go as hard as you can. It's a good way to get rhabdo. But it also made sure that people didn't come back. So if you were there, it's because you wanted to be there. And then you have enough of those people, and then they, and this story starts to sound familiar. You have a bunch of nutcases in one place willing to kill themselves for something, and that reinforces it. He put that idea in my head. He was the first one to say, when you were feeling sorry for yourself, and the first one to say, yeah, you're patting yourself on the back. Like, don't break your arm jerking yourself off. Like, it's not that, like, you would hit something and you kind of be smiling and you come up and tell you 5 people that could do that, in middle school or whatever. So those memories, whether it's in the gym or whether it's even an epiphany about training, it's like all the things I know I have good enough reason to intuit that that's the case. I have a hard time tracing them back to the moment I learned them, but it all comes together in kind of cohesive worldview. And the big numbers I hit, the ones I should be over the moon about, some of them, my brain is almost erased because as soon as I hit it, it's like, that was a training day. What's next? Yeah. And I think I got a lot out of that. Those cringy memories, though, the ones where you do fail, I think do have the biggest impact, and they do teach you the most. And if you're good, and I obsess a little too much, but if you're good at holding on to those moments where you felt stupid or you figured out something the hardest way possible, coaching, you have to learn how to be a coach, just like you have to learn how to be a lifter. When your bad decision-making fucks somebody else up, that'll keep you up at night if you care. And then that attaches itself into that web, into that big memory that you're hoping to pass on. Now, all of that you said about having that memory that you pass on, that being integral to other people is, I think that's the only reason I've been in this as long as I have, because that is part of my legacy that I want. I enjoy it. I think I'm good at it. I've gotten pretty good response from it. I think it's necessary, but selfishly, it's like, that's something that I want to be able to say that I contributed to. It's like the reason we have kids or whatever. It's like to have that thing that lives past you. And I don't want to make this too grandiose, but we're in a world where that network doesn't exist for a lot of people. The ability to have excellence in your life doesn't exist for a lot of people. At least I don't think it does. I would argue people have greater capacity than they think if they would just kind of, zone in their parameters for what that means. But if you have knowledge, if you have the hours spent doing something and the ability to help somebody else with it, that makes you a part of something. And when everything's getting blown further and further apart, people go longer without seeing other people in person. People feel more disaffected and on the outskirts of society. Like that's huge. And not that I knew this when I was 16 and thought I was going to be world's strongest man one day, but where I am here, and it feeds into the gratitude I talked about feeling earlier, is because where I'm at here, it's like a happy accident, but it just came together where it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't go to college, or I didn't, take that other job opportunity, or I didn't move where, so-and-so said I should or whatever. But it's like I did this thing that led to an amount of experience that can contribute to something beyond where I'm at and connect me to something. And it doesn't matter if it's lifting. I mean, lifting weights is great for so many reasons. So I'm not knocking lifting, but whether it's lifting or collecting toy trains or whatever, it's like your bag, it has the potential to connect you to something bigger. And I think it's just really a matter of recognizing that allows you to kind of unlock that and really add just a dimension to your life that many people I don't think know is there.
How do you balance the fact that your business is basically the same as your training and everything else? So it's all tied together. So how do you go about working that? Where first off, the first point I want to be able to make is, even through all your competitive endeavors, because a lot of people say have no B plan. There's definitely time to always develop a B plan.
Sure.
Because you're not training 16 hours a day every single day. So it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, by the way. Like, don't have this B plan, but under the surface, you're always kind of building, you don't know what it's going to look like, long term, but you're always building towards something where now you're at a place to where you're competing again and you have this business, and now it's like, oh fuck, I can never get away from this shit because everything I do is this. My only time away is with my family, and a lot of the times there you're still thinking of the ideas of what needs to be done. Yeah,
well, the B plan's another reason or another case against burning your entire life down by being an unhinged prick in service of one singular goal. It helps as you go, and just doing the bare minimum will do this. It helps you network. It's one of the most powerful things anybody can do. You don't have to be like a whore for attention. You don't have to go like hustle and talk to everybody you can. But as long as you have some openness and you exist in the space long enough, it's like you build connections. That helps immensely. And it helps give you perspective. I do have a B plan specifically. I would like to teach when I'm older, but that requires a degree. I dicked around in college for 10 years and have an excess of units that point to no singular degree. It's like I went from being like I was going to be a firefighter, math major. I got my ass kicked in a bunch of upper division math classes. I was in the Kines program for a year. And then I just spiraled because I had no direction. However, I'm not upset about it because of where I am now. Given the choices I made, a degree wouldn't have helped me then. But I'm taking online classes right now to get a bachelor's in psychology. Eventually, I'll have to commit to getting a master's, and then you can teach at a community college. And that's another aspect of paying it forward that I enjoy doing and I think is necessary. But I think back to how I benefited from that, because the time before I even ended up at university, it's like the junior college is very small, intimate. It's kind of like on the level of teaching high school, but the people that are there, they're voluntarily. So you bypass a lot of that bullshit. And then depending on where you go, you can make good pay doing that. But that's just kind of the thing I'd like to settle in. I could see myself being like 65. I lift a little bit here and there, but really I'm just watching my kids grow up and I'm teaching, because if you're not moving, you're dying. So that's why even lifting, let's forget about career plan, right? It's like you get people that want to lift and they don't know what else to do. And I hate to see it. Masters divisions are becoming more and more popular, which it's good in some respects because, I know some 80-year-olds that can squat, a few hundred pounds. It's changing people's idea of what they can do. But in strongman, like, people get older, they don't typically get leaner. They don't typically. So it gives people a reason, I think, to have their heavyweight package in the years where they should be stripping it off. So I don't love that. But a lot of people that are a bit more forward thinking will move into, it's a meme now. Old powerlifters, they go do jujitsu, or they'll I know guys that have gone into triathlons, whatever. I will always be moving. It's just something I have to do now. I think I'm too damn twitchy to not do that. But yeah, you do. You have to think ahead. You have to have a B plan. As far as balancing, not getting burnt out. I'm very fortunate there. I think my career is different enough from the lifting where it doesn't overlap. I could imagine where it would burn me out, where I'm like, I don't want to see another fucking barbell. I don't want to talk about programming one more time. I'm focused so much more, probably to my detriment, the detriment of the channel. I'm focused more on the creative aspect and trying to get good at content creation. So I experiment a lot, and until you find the thing that kicks you up a notch, it's like there's a lot of floundering. So I've had a lot of bad ideas, taking the channel a direction that wasn't great, and then I've come back, but I'm always trying new things. So that aspect, it's like I know what I know, and I like learning. So I'm always talking to people, trying to find things that I didn't really know about, do bits on different lifters and different systems, whatever. But my work is really, it's a lot of scripting, trying different story presentations, trying different visual mediums that I think people will respond to. Maybe one day I'll do a celebrity reaction video and it'll just take off, and that's what I do. But I have this itch that, like, if I find something that is like sufficiently good at getting the information across and appeals to a wide enough group, but it also kind of appeals to my basic creative sensibilities, like, that'll be it, and it'll just be all over. So I'm still kind of working for that, but that saved me from the burnout of just content,
Yeah.
lifting.
Well, with the content, a question I would have is, say you have those reaction type videos, or one of the topics you hear down here was like cheap drama and stuff like that. Is there's a weird balance with all that, right? Because you can do that, you can get the views, but then it's not evergreen at all. A year from now, you have old videos on just periodization, wave loading, breaking down programs that are evergreen as hell. It doesn't matter. They're always going to, and you probably see it in your analytics. Every now and again, one of those are just going to pop for some reason and then do really well. But any of those reaction videos, if they hit, they're going to hit for what, a week, 2 days?
That's exactly how it happened.
Then it's going to die. And then if that's all you have, there's no evergreen content. But yet there's this weird balance, that you got to figure out.
That's completely true. Like, where I'm at, I think I'm at like 250 or so, 250,000 subs. So I kind of rank what a good video is around that. So if I get about half that in views, that's a pretty solid video. And then if I have a video that's excellent, which is rare, or it just catches right, it'll exceed that and get a bit over. Let's see, the last two big ones I did, I responded to the Nippert Van Wyck thing, and somebody made a comment. It was true. They're like, every content creator got a free video today.
Yeah.
It's like you had to. And everybody was just getting like, I almost got a little upset. I think I got like 200,000 views. There's people get 500,000, million views just like crazy because it was such a big thing. But that, and then I responded to, like, I don't know, there was some debacle with the squat event at Brian Shaw's show that as a strongman, I'm like, I just wanted to comment on that. And that did really, really well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a day. It gets more views than I've ever gotten ever in a single day, and then it just flatlines, right? And then the model early on was getting more evergreen content. However, what stays evergreen, what people are going to end up looking for, is a crapshoot, because they don't all evenly track in forever. There's some videos that are long forgotten about, and some are surprising. They'll pop up from 5-6 years ago out of nowhere and start getting traction. But as long as a big chunk of my content is that type of stuff that's searchable, I can always bank on that. And that's probably why I'm secure as I am right now with this, is like my main financial endeavor. If I was doing reaction stuff, I'd probably have to do the Greg Doucette twice a day. What famous person can I comment on to make sure that I'm getting clicks today? I'd say probably 90% of my channel, maybe there's people that'll argue with me on that. I like to think 90% of my channel is stuff that would qualify as evergreen or is relevant. And that just checks so many boxes, and it makes me happy and it's more fulfilling. Sometimes I do the drama stuff. I don't care that people call it drama. Like, it's same thing with like politics. Like, I don't inject politics into my videos, partially out of principle, partially out of self-preservation, because people don't want that shit. I get annoyed with it. However, my primary mission is not to never say anything political ever either. So it's like occasionally a joke will slip. Like, I had to leave I don't like California. I'll say it. I hope the state falls in the fucking ocean. I had to take my wife out of there when her mom was on hospice. Like, I am not happy with. Anyways, I made a joke and like somebody lose their mind. It's like my goal is not to sanitize myself completely. And similarly with like drama stuff, it's like, there's a culture around it. People have views, they have opinions. When somebody acts out of line, when somebody does something stupid, when there's something outrageous, people want to hear about it. I think it's kind of a lame aesthetic for people to pull, like, I can't believe people are talking about this. It's like, where, if you watch sports, like what sports, like, what are you talking about? Like what arena, you know, when some over the top shit happens, does this not happen? So I really try to go out of my way. And I don't think I've ever stretched myself to have an opinion on something I don't care about. I really tried to go out of my way to just do things that get in my head and elicit a response that I think somebody would be entertained by hearing or learn from hearing. And that kind of defines what I'm going to do. And thankfully, those don't come up that often. So it's not a big part of my channel.
What is the pull for you to want to teach psychology?
I think there's just too many things that pointed me in that direction. First of all, my dad was a psychiatrist, so that was a big influence. And there's kind of a layered background to that because I had a very good relationship with my dad until I was like 14 or 15. Some mental health issues running in our family. There was some of that mixed with some addiction and I don't know, midlife crisis, whatever. I haven't talked to my dad since I was 15 or 16. But speaking to the benefits of having a father, I can't even be bitter because the value that was packed into those 13 years or so, I can't imagine what my life would have been like without that. So that's perspective I have. We had a lot of talks when I was younger about stuff he thought was interesting from his perspective. I mean, he would teach me all kinds of things about like just the way the human brain is put together, the way people behave. Some of it was like Ripley's Believe It or Not type stuff, like fringe cool shit about that world that you wouldn't know about. Like, you know, hey, here's a documentary about, you know, a guy that sees colors when he does math and can do rapid calculations. You know, here's somebody who got shot in the head and had half their brain carved out and still survived and is a functioning human being. Like stuff like that always interested me early on, and that was a connection to my dad. What took that a step further was actually during this period of my life when I was younger, there was a period where he was struggling with stuff, and we ended up in this it was like a 12-step adjacent program. So me and my mom went every week for a year in conjunction with him doing his bout. And it was privileged as fuck because this was specifically for doctors and family of doctors. This is not something everybody has access to. And regardless of whatever our economic situation was after that, it's again, this is like so much power in this thing that I got, and kind of disbelief that this doesn't exist for other people. Half the curriculum from like 7th and 8th grade should just be scrapped and replaced with this type of stuff because it is so relative and important how people form their earliest relationships, how they make decisions that impact the rest of their life, who they choose to be in their social circle and how they navigate that type of awareness. It's missing from everybody. And this was one of the most transformative things I ever went through because that's where I learned hands-on about not just how personality disorders and addiction and mental health works, but dynamics like codependency. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. And every time you observe people out, you see the red flags to where they can't be denied. That got me out of relationships that in some other world would have gone on for 15 years and just ruined my life. Like that got me out of situations that I think without that, you can't hope for anybody to make a good choice. And it's just, again, so obvious and just so under discussed in society, which is kind of unfortunate. So that was one of the most transformative things I ever went through. I credit that with any ability to dig myself out of a hole as I struggled with similar things my dad did throughout part of my life. I credit that to my selection and partner. My wife is fucking amazing. She's extremely intelligent. She's way too good looking for me, which is the reason I have the cutest baby on earth. And there's times where I look, and beyond all that, she's healthy. She's grounded. She has a good relationship with her siblings. She's conscientious. She makes me better. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like preserving the things that can prop you up. If you think that those are distractions, you're probably in a situation, or you've probably come to believe that that's all other people can be to you, which is unfortunate because when you are good at curating the people around you, it's like they say, well, you're the average of your 5 closest friends, things like that. Like if you're better at not putting up with bullshit in the first 2 weeks of your relationship. I had a roommate. He was in couples counseling with a girl he had been dating for 3 months. Like, people will, yeah, that's the right response. People will cling to bullshit if they don't think they deserve more, if they think it's normal, if they've been conditioned to it, whatever. Anyway, so what got me out of all that was this. So the background, the history, what that has kind of done for my life, how it ties into this other stuff, how it ties into content. I would love to do kind of a push that addresses more of the psychological stuff. Part of it from a performance aspect, psychology of performance. Part of it from kind of a modernity, society, social shit that's going on, men's crisis, people being lonelier, more removed, mental health is a thing. There's so much in there that I think would layer over with lifting like beautifully. It's just a matter of kind of executing it. But anyways, everything just pointed me in that direction. So that was like a no-brainer if I was going to go back to school.
Were there any topics you wanted to go over that I didn't bring up?
Oh, not off the top of my head.
You kind of hit it in your last statement because we were talking about social issues and all the things that are kind of tied into that, and then the psychology. I kind of want to circle back because now this makes more sense to the people that are listening. Is when I talked earlier about Dr. Dwayne Jackson's Penn model, of the psychology, the sociology, and the biology, kind of all tying together, and where those all overlap, is where that peak performance is going to be. So you spoke a little on the psychological aspect. Now, on the social aspect, that was an interesting conversation with him, right? Because when you come through the background that I've come through, your social aspect is it's the same people, right? It's lifters, it's meatheads that are pretty much at least the ones I was around were all antisocial and so forth. Then what he was speaking about is the importance of still networking with people that are outside of that. Like, are you speaking to the person when you go to the grocery store? Even for a couple minutes at the checkout, because all that social factors has influence on that, especially in person, instead of what you're taking from media or the news, because that's really not a social aspect. It's a propaganda, media. It's a media aspect, not social aspect. And I think a lot of people's social aspects are being replaced with the digital social aspect. And unless it's like a Discord group or, something like that, which is still not as good as an in-person thing, but it's definitely better than just absorbing, without any kind of dialogue.
Or than just being alone.
Yeah. How do you see that social aspect playing into the performance?
Ooh, that's big. Yeah, the digital stuff, it's like replacing your calories with plastic. Like, it's called social but it's as far from genuine social engagement as you can imagine. You see that with the comments, shit people throw out. That's either they're dumping and they'll write multiple paragraphs directed to nobody at all because it's cathartic for them, or they'll do the opposite and just throw shit at the wall like it's bathroom graffiti line. Like, it's very artificial, and the stuff that gets selected that you scroll through, like, I could go on, and I think that's a big part of the problems that we're going to face going on, that a lot of this can be kind of an antidote for. I think that the social aspect was huge. I mean, it's an extension of the psychological, but viewing that as its own thing. What you said about sorry, what was this guy's name?
Dr. Dwayne Jackson.
Dwayne Jackson. Yeah. Okay, I gotta remember.
We put the podcast up, I think, last week.
Oh, I'll check it out. I'll check. Yeah, this sounds interesting. The social aspect. I mean, so he's like that statement about talking to people when you go out. The little bids like that. I'm finding that out. It's funny because we talk about the minutia of training that people focus on too much. In life, a lot of things, especially with social stuff, your day-to-day, your habits, your tics, whatever, I think it's the opposite, because those you're always immersed in. Like, it's just the atmosphere that surrounds you. You pick them up like a lint roller. It's like just what covers you. And that reinforces over time your position in the society you live in. And I know people, and I've been like this before too. If I'm in a pissy mood, the dose is too high, I got shit going on, I don't want to talk to people. I'm very much that personality. I'm a bit more, I get so much, I love talking to people. I get so much out of it. I hate initiating conversation, and I hate doing it kind of when I got other shit going on in my head. I have to remind myself, especially since I'm just making content, all day inside. I don't talk to anybody. Just being able to have a conversation with somebody when you go to the grocery store or the bank or whatever reminds you that you live in a bigger network of people, that you're part of something, and not just for your own health and well-being and security, but also as an obligation. Like, you have a role to play for others as well. You're not just this little thing that's consuming over and over, and whatever ad revenue you generate for the person, like, that's your contribution. Like we all have a base obligation to the people around us. Be courteous, talk to, engage, make other people comfortable in the space. Don't just crush them with your awkwardness. It very much is a privilege to be in a situation where you feel at home in a space. And something I think a lot about in academia, and I won't derail it with this, but this is just an example. In academia and over the last 10 years or so in popular culture, there's a big thing about like critical theory. But one of the things that comes out of that isn't as wonky or over the top as a lot of people perceive the whole movement as being, it's just the basic idea of power. And you don't have to look at it from those sensationalized or really touchy charged topics. You can look at that in your own life and pull a lot out of it, because I've been in situations where I felt like I had no leverage. I felt like I wasn't deserving of other people's time or attention. I didn't deserve to interrupt people to ask something, or to, just basically insisting on yourself or taking up the space that you live in. And it's suffocating. And there's people that spend their whole life like that. Where, on the other hand, as I've matured and as I've gotten better coping skills and I've built up an awareness, but also as I've just been in the same place longer, it is a huge privilege to be able to navigate spaces where you're completely comfortable, where you can just behave, you can talk, you can engage, you can do the things that we take for granted day to day. To extend that to lifting, and why I think it has so much to give people, I always tell people when they're struggling to get into it, or if they're having trouble with their training, one of the best things you can do is find some network of people that train. Doesn't even matter if they're good. If you make it a social thing, compliance is higher. CrossFit, people can talk shit all day about CrossFit. CrossFit had an amazing net positive effect on society. And it showed everybody that the most important thing about getting people to lift, it's not LA Fitness hiring more salespeople, it's turning it into a social endeavor. And that's how you got droves of not meatheads, not former athletes wanting to relive their glory days, regular ass people with commitments showing up because they had people to talk to, they had this common thing to engage with. And when you go through that, it's this experience, and it gets so layered. You take those lessons more seriously. You kind of mold into it a bit better. And the social element, it just can't be understated.
Yeah, I think the only part that I think people miss with all that is, if they are that selfish person that's only interested in getting their lifts better, that will make your lifts better, right? I'm not talking about you have to go out and have a half-hour conversation with somebody.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
If it's checking out, thank you, how's your day going, right? And then all of a sudden, oh, it's great, how's yours? 2-minute conversation, you walk out feeling better than when you walked in.
Yes.
Just because of one question or one small little bit of dialogue, and you feel more connected to the community. That person's going to feel more connected to the community, because at the local level, that matters a lot. At federal level, maybe not so much, because there's so much diversity. In a local community, you're all kind of striving to have a really cool, nice local community, right? With all that, but it will help, right? Because now you're going to walk out and you're not going to think, I just bought my fucking chicken breast and rice, I need to eat this bullshit. It was enough of a disruption pattern to break out, to realize that this is a bigger world than just what happens in the gym and so forth, and not all influenced digitally.
Yeah. People generally know when they're giving into the worst impulses of themselves. When you're just not having it and you don't want to fucking talk to anybody or whatever, it is never not a good idea to push back against that and kind of make yourself be uncomfortable. It's so funny because we will come in and we will take discomfort and we'll bottle it and we'll pull it out and do an extract and inject it into ourselves. We'll go through the most uncomfortable, painful shit because we have this view of it that's going to make us better. And it's like, well, I can survive that. I can be uncomfortable. I can puke from a leg workout because that's how badly I want to get to this end goal. Social stuff is no different. Relationship stuff is no different. I learned that being with my wife for 8 years. It's like there's layers of discomfort that we will see as intolerable. That really isn't that fucking bad. It's just you have to have the basic awareness that, hey, if I suffer this out a little bit, I'm probably going to be better for it. And the way it benefits you, like what you said, is the only reason you need, and it's obvious. People feel better if you engage with somebody. Again, psychology, it's like you know, fake it till you make it. If you just smile, it doesn't matter if you feel like shit, it affects your mood. It's all connected. If you have a pleasant conversation with somebody, it affects your day, can make your day that much better, but it affects you in ways you can't even imagine. It's like the butterfly effect. It's the potential that you're going to talk to somebody down the road that could potentially help you out. Because if you talk to people out of force of habit, eventually you're going to talk to people that have something more to offer you. Eventually you're going to get an opportunity. Eventually you're going to learn something that you would have never otherwise learned. You'll have perspective. It'll add motivation to the things you do that does not exist if you are in fact this isolated little creature at the bottom of the hierarchy fighting for basic survival. It affects you in more ways than you can think about. And what really is unfortunate out of all of this is we're watching this decline, and not to be like, oh, things were better back in the day. Every era has its fucked up shit. But with men, we are watching this unfortunate decline where fewer men are dating. It's like we're almost following, like Japan has this problem. There's areas that have this problem where as they develop, things become modernized, and we haven't figured out how to arrange society in a way that works the way we're used to. So it's displacing people. And one of them is that you got big chunks of young men, they don't have girlfriends. Big chunks of young men, they have no avenue to meet or talk to other people. Big chunks of young men end up having no purpose or connection, and it's unfortunate. And it's not just that people are living like suffering, it's that there's contribution there that now can't be made. There's a reinforcement to the rest of society that we're missing out on. And it really is too bad.
Any final thoughts that you have as we wrap this up?
I always get my final thoughts like a half hour afterwards. But no, right now, no, man. I'm just super happy to be here. This was great.
What's the best way for people to follow, reach you?
So people can find me on YouTube. Just Alexander Bromley is my channel. You can go to basestrength.com. That has access to the books that I've written, some articles up there. And that's where you can also check out Base Strength AI, which is the app that we made that features my programs that I've put together in a personalized fashion that uses some AI capabilities to help with weight selection, volume manipulation, exercise selection, and so on. And then Instagram is Brahma Rama for the one post I do every 6 weeks.
All right. We'll put the link in the description. I want to thank you for coming out. Thank you guys for listening. We're done.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
You don't want to leave people stranded. If we're going to do this, because somebody's going to have to always be there. Yeah. You know, one of us would have to always be there because it was a different.
At the time, all of us started training pretty much together.
You know, you were one of the first, you know, just to start training some of the lifts somewhere else. And your deadlift, you know, went like 100 pounds.
For me.